How are you?
For all your hard work with everything.
Okay, I hope it helps.
Good evening, everyone, and we're going to call the meeting to order of the Town Council Budget Workshop, number 3, is it? Number 3, for Tuesday, May 2nd. If you will please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. So we're going to move on to public comment. This portion of the meeting is specifically set aside for comments from the public who are asked to leave their comments to 2 minutes. Any person interested in providing public comment should email publicmeetings@rockyhillct.gov and will be provided with a link to attend the meeting and instructions on how to participate. And is there anyone who wishes to be heard? Okay, hearing none.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda to move item B1 ambulance to be the first item under budget review.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we're going to do a slight adjustment and just get public safety, subsection 1 ambulance now. You're
Want me
welcome.
to start? Okay, I'll start with that. And I don't have my screen up, but this is a relatively simple budget to follow. We just wanted to point out that in our budget document, we had $100,000, yes?
Do we have our people who are remoting in? Because our screens are blank.
Yeah, mine is.
Oh, no, I got the thumbs up.
We're
Yep,
good?
they're there.
Okay.
But the screens are.
Here they comes.
They're up.
All right, thank you.
Oh, good. I have my screen back here. Okay. All right, rewind, let's do this. So, yes, it's better with the screen. So we're pointing out, I'm going to go down to the budget section, and as we had in the proposed budget, an original increase of $100,000 on that. Since the book has gone out, we've had several meetings with Aetna and the volunteer ambulance group, and have been able to at least negotiate the financial piece. Hopefully, we'll finalize the contract itself and bring it to finance. It's in the near future. What we are having now on that budget line item, we had looking at a $50,000 increase over 3 years is what the proposal is going to be. And what we also looked at is the proportion of that contract for many, many years had been shared at 79% cost to the town and 21% to the volunteer ambulance. Not quite sure how those percentages came about, but that's what we've had for years. So when we were together meeting, we have come up with a 60% cost to the town and 40% to the volunteer ambulance. So the change that you'll see on this page is, oops, hold on there, that you'll have on that line a $5,000 increase by spreading that original contract increase amount over the 3 years, as well as changing the distribution. So, good news, we are decreasing our budget by $95,000.
Okay, so that's the fees line?
Correct.
Okay, so.
All other line items will remain the same.
And you said this is a 3-year contract?
Correct.
It's a new, I wasn't paying attention at the very beginning. I'm sorry. Is it a new 3-year?
Will be.
Yes, it
renewal?
will be.
It will be
At a
once it
different-
goes through the financing here.
Gotcha, okay.
So I understand the net increase. What is the increase in the contract? It's 120,000
$50,000 per year for 3 years.
for 3 years, 150K. Now, that portion, right? I'm not talking about the net, right? You talked about the net, I know, which is renegotiated with the volunteers, and it comes down to a certain number. What was the process for renegotiating that contract?
Several meetings with all of us at the table together.
And who are the all of us?
Go ahead. We had,
That would be
you wanna,
me.
yeah, I don't want to speak for you all the
BB,
time.
Mona, Kim Ritchie, one of the deputy chief, the chief, Brian Goodrich, Nancy Brescia, Nancy Brescia's husband, right? He's
Eric,
Eric.
yes,
I'm sorry, Eric.
yeah.
And Aetna, several people from Aetna.
So the 100,000, was there a negotiation up, down? Was that the asking, like the starting point, or was the ending point? What were the different, scenarios which were presented?
Yeah,
I
that-
guess just a little bit of a detail on the negotiation side of things.
Yeah, so the 100,000 was the first amount that was coming in, and that was prior to any distribution of the, changing in the percentages. So at that point, we said, we need to come back and work on it together. We looked at the percentage distribution first, which was really good from the volunteer group to look at that and come up with the 60-40 with us. And then at that point, we asked with Aetna to come back, and would they consider spreading that dollar amount over a 3-year contract and getting an upfront?
So
we had
my question is
stages.
more pertaining to the Aetna side of things. I'm glad that we were able to negotiate with the volunteers, and that's an amicable number for both the sides, right? But on the Aetna side, what was the impetus for that number, and why is that number that high? And what was discussed? Like, did they propose 100,000 and then we just came back and said, okay, we'll do it? Or did they propose a higher number and then you negotiated it down?
Yeah. All right. So that was their original proposal, and like I said, we had an adopted or a proposed budget to bring, and it was not. It was probably at no point did we say this is good. We said we're going to get together, sit down, and come up with something that we can present for an adopted budget. Aetna has not had an increase over the past few contracts, and costs are going up. So I think all parties at the table agreed that there was definitely the need for the increase because they had not increased over the years, although costs had. Obviously, to absorb 100,000 on the first year, which would be good for them. That would help them catch up on that first year. But just to work amicably together, they were agreeable to spread that over the 3-year contract.
Mona, at any point, did we think about going out to bid to renegotiate that number down?
No. It was a good negotiation. Not at any point.
Okay, thank you.
So just kind of recap, just to be sure I understand this. As I understand it, the initial ask by Aetna was a $100,000 increase. That has been negotiated down to $50,000 per year. And that's $50,000 that is shared between the town and the Voluntary Ambulance Association through their own fundraising efforts. And the division between the town and the Volunteer Ambulance Association of that 50 has been rejiggered to further reduce the increase to the town. So there's really the two elements there. So one is some give on Aetna's side, and the other part of it is the association taking on a burden of additional fundraising, I guess, correct? Okay, thank you.
Does the town have a threshold about when they would put something out to bid?
Well, go ahead with that one. So yes, but this is you do have a standard bidding process. When you have a service that's in place, and it's in your best interest to not disrupt the service. So, and I'm sure if I get the language in front of me, but there is not an obligation. So if you find it's a sole source or the disruption and it's in the best interest, then continuing to do a renewal is appropriate. I imagine if this was our first time going around with ambulances and contract, this is definitely a bid. You'll find, I can't even imagine when it started, but it's been on a renewal process for, I think I look back to at least 20 years. Yeah.
Madam Mayor, I note on my screen that John Emanuel is raising his virtual hand.
Oh,
Yes, thank you, thank you, Bill. Yeah, just to go along with some of those questions, Mona, I don't think, and this is mainly for the Finance Committee, because there's two things here. One is the town's best interest is to have the volunteers garner as much revenue as they can. So there should be a stipulation in the contract to not constrain them, that if they can put the ambulance on like a Monday or a Friday, that they should be able to, without a lock-in from like Aetna to say, no, you can't. So that's just one thing. The other thing is, you know, I know time is of the essence with this contract, but it would be it would be in our best interest that at least an RFP should have had gone out, because there's organizations out there that may have not been communicating enough that they're interested in expanding. We may not know unless we sent out an RFP. So, for example, if Middlesex Hospital and their ambulance wanted to expand north to Rocky Hill, and they came in and said, you know, we'll do it for a year or two at minimal cost to you, it may be, as long as they fit our guidelines and meet the criteria, it would be in our best interest to look at that. I just hesitate to, you know, just kind of throw all our eggs in one basket with Aetna, when there could be other organizations, commercial services out there that are potentially interested, offering the same sort of patient care, response times, and metrics that Aetna meets at a lower cost.
Well, understood. And again, this isn't the presentation of the contract. The contract will go to finance, and those are the issues, so it's not ironed out yet. But we did want to at least bring to you that in the proposed budget, that $100,000 is not the proposed number at this point of the discussion table. There's no contract assigned or agreed to, or the terms, so the terms are still up for discussion. This is just acknowledging that that number that's in your proposed bucket as it stands today is very high, and we can make it doable within a $5,000 increase. The contract will go to finance, ideally before
But I also
July
think
1st.
we should recognize the volunteers for stepping up and adding more of
Absolutely.
their share.
They've been wonderful.
Okay, thank you. Yep, thank you.
Just to follow through with that, when this does go to finance, it's going to be too late to put this out to bid or do other options. You know, it's, I don't know if this should have been brought to us a little earlier, and we could have discussed it and thought about putting it out to bid. I mean, at this point, it's going to be too late when it goes to finance, because July 1st probably is when it's effective.
Correct.
So, some think it's in the best interest of town, but it may not be. It should have been maybe researched a little more, in my opinion. But I also do want to acknowledge the volunteers for helping step up and help use some of their funds to offset the town's budget. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on ambulance?
No.
Okay, so let's go back then to presentation A, which is Board of Education, subsection 1A, operating budget.
Can you hear me? Thank you for being here, for letting us be here tonight, Mayor Murata. My name is Mark Zito. I'm the superintendent of schools. I have some of our leadership team here with me tonight. Chuck Zettergren did a lot of the work putting the budget together. Amy Stevenson, she's our assistant superintendent for human resources and special education. Ron LaMontagne, who serves as our facilities director. And we have our vice chair of our board tonight, Amber Tucker. Some other board members I see here, Mr. Kosker, Ms. Baron Morphia, Mr. Shabra, Mr. Clements. So appreciate the opportunity to talk about our budget tonight. So as always, we have certain assumptions when we present the budget. We want to continue to provide high-quality educational programming to our kids, keep our concerted focus on improving teaching and learning, maintain our staffing levels to conform with Board of Ed guidelines, maintain instructional supplies where they need to be, keep our facilities clean and safe, continue the access to educational technology, and meet our legal requirements for special education. So we have, as typical, factors driving the board's budget request. There is an increase this year. Salaries, benefits, about 2/3 of our costs are related to personnel. We have some increases in property services, tuition, and the equipment line item. First thing we do when we build our budget is we look at our enrollment. We've seen a very stable enrollment pattern for the last few years. To get a little more specific on that chart, we always measure October 1 to October 1. So on October 1 of 2022, you see the number there, 2545. This past October, we had dropped down about 22 kids. As of today, the enrollment is bumped up a little bit. It's 2561. So that's a net increase of 38 kids since last October. The overall picture has been stable, but I will talk a little bit about the predictions for the future. We do see some decline. You've got some information in your budget books as well. Nationally, over the next 10 years, we expect about a 4.5% decrease in the school-age population, pre-K through 12. In the Northeast, that decline is even more pronounced. It's about 6%. We do anticipate that Rocky Hill will continue to decline. That's actually good news from a budget perspective because fewer students means we need fewer staff. So from that standpoint, we don't want to see a rapid decline because layoffs are never a good thing to do. But where we can consolidate positions through retirement and attrition, we do make those efforts. One factor that is impacting costs in the opposite direction is the situation with our demographic changes in the town. Although the enrollment has remained stable for the past several years, we've seen a dramatic increase in the number of students who receive special education services and English language services as well. So you can see those numbers. They're fairly significant. In an 11-year period, our special ed increase went up. We went up 85%. So the overall number is still around 2,600 students. But in October of 2012, we had 231 special needs kids. We're now at 427. That number continues to climb. Part of it is because we have great services here. Part of it, I think, is related to COVID. Part of it is just changing demographics within the town. You also see a corresponding increase in the number of English language learners. These are kids whose primary language in the home is not English. In 2013, we had 108 students. We now have 261 in that category. So that's a big change that does have an impact on what we spend because those kids require specialized services. As I mentioned, and this is more detail on the projection, you will see, potentially 10 years down the road, looking at a drop of almost 500 students. Now, again, that's a long-range projection, but we have started to see, particularly at the elementary schools, the numbers dropping, and you'll see how that's impacted the budget a little bit later on. Our high school, I've been here 12 years, has always been around 700 to 730 kids. We're still in that range. Our middle school, grades 6 through 8, typically in the low 600s, we're still there, but we're starting to see some drop at the elementary level. In terms of performance, we always want to talk about the academic achievement of the students. They continue to do extremely well. This is a district performance index. This is a composite of the district's math performance, grades 3 through 8, plus the SAT. You can see that within our district reference group, towns that have a similar economic profile to Rocky Hill, we are right up at the top with the top scorers, and we're pretty low in spending comparatively to towns in our economic reference group. So for mathematics, top of the hill. In terms of English language arts, again, right at the top with the highest performance index. So we're really proud of the efforts of our teachers and obviously our students and the family support they're getting at home. It's paying off with really good results. And again, in science, district performance index, very top. So best scores. Now, a couple years ago, I was challenged by Counselor Prakash to start looking at some of the wealthier towns in the state. So I've got those charts for you tonight. So when we compare to Durg B, we would be really down towards the bottom on what we spend. These are towns that have a much higher median income in those towns. Woodbridge, Madison, Farmington, so forth. But you could see score-wise, we're right in the middle of the pack with those significantly wealthier towns. So we're very competitive. A 73.6 in math is a really strong score, and you can see where we fare against the towns that frankly spend more on education than we do. Same situation there with English language arts, middle of the pack, outscoring some local districts like South Windsor, Granby. Again, they're Durg B, so they're at a higher economic level, but our kids are competing very effectively against those students as well. And again, in science, very competitive, basically essentially tied with Avon, ahead of Granby, South Windsor. Very good scores again in comparison to those wealthier towns. As far as a little more specifics with the grades 3 through 8, back to our Durg. Number 2 on the Smarter Balanced in math. Number 2 on the English Language Arts test in our Durg, which is Durg D. Number 1 on the SAT math. Number 2 on the SAT evidence-based reading and writing, which we would have called the verbal back when I was in school, and probably when you guys were in school as well. In terms of our special ed expenses, it's 20% of our budget, almost 21%. That's efficient. If you look within our Durg at what the other districts are spending, we've done a lot of in-district programming, which has helped keep the cost down. Our overall budget increase adopted by the board was 5.41%. It's about a $2.8 million increase. Here's what's driving that. Salaries are up a little over 3%. We just negotiated our teacher contract. It comes in at pretty much 3% per year. Benefits, 0.65. So we just break that 5.41 down for you. You can see where the numbers fall for property services, tuition. Equipment is up about 1%, and I'll just be direct about that. That's primarily a function of the town council's adopted budget for it. When you appropriated the budget last year, you shaved about $507,000 off the board's request, so we went back and we pre-spent it, and we pre-spent it on equipment. So that $546,000, most of that was just equipment we purchased out of the year-end surplus, so it creates an artificial driver the following year. But you can see the overall increase is 5.41. Staffing, in terms of what we're doing with staffing changes, we do need an EL teacher. You saw where those numbers were increasing. We are adding assistant principals at the elementary level. However, in order to do that, we've reassigned the math coordinator. So we really just need one new administrative position. We've reconfigured a special ed supervisor and the math administrator. We do have a culinary director. That salary there reflects benefits as well. For the Dream Academy, many of you have been to the Dream Academy. I'll just say the cost of that individual is significantly less than one outplacement if we were placing those kids into private facilities for their 18 through 22 post-transitional education. So we think the cost of that person is well worth the offsets to keep those kids in town. We've added a behavior analyst. Again, that's a function of those special needs students. You see the number that I talked about earlier. In terms of the elementary classrooms, I talked about the enrollment dropping. We're reducing 4 elementary classroom positions. We're still staying within the board guidelines, but you could see that that's an offset there. And we take, a very hard look at those enrollments that I talked about earlier, and we're able to make reductions at the elementary level of 4 classroom teachers. We have a retirement that we will not fill. We're able to make some consolidations there. So those are offsets to what we need to do. So we're trying to balance and be as fiscally responsible as possible. Where the money goes, you could see the chart here. As I said earlier, 2/3 of the expenses are salaries, another 16% on benefits, you're going to consistently find in any school district 80 to 85% of your costs are people costs. Again, if we were not as efficient with our dollars, if we were simply at the state average for spending, we'd be requesting an additional $6.3 million. That's simply the state mean on spending. Just the district reference group, our economic profile, our request would be up $2.5 million, just to be at the mean. So for the most recent data available, our spending was 112 out of 166, so we're towards the bottom. And I'm not suggesting we need to go up higher, because we're getting good results at an efficient cost. But anybody in the community that's suggesting we're not spending appropriately on education, I would challenge them to say, where would you like us to fall on the continuum within the state? We're 112 out of 166 with really good results. And for the wealth factor, that's the Anglic factor. It's a composite measure of a town's relative ability to pay. We're 77th in the state. So we're roughly at midpoint, more or less, in terms of wealth statewide, but far below that in terms of what we spend. And we take pride in that efficiency. It's something I'm proud of, actually. But the bottom line is we think the taxpayers are getting really good results on the investment they're making in education. And you know, as council members, you want to have strong public schools because they attract people to your town. Again, on per pupil expenditures, you can see where we rank towards the bottom half in the DIRG. If it's okay, I'm going to jump into the CIP because it's part of our presentation. Certainly happy to answer questions about that as well. On this chart here, we have what the historic spending's been over the last several years. You've appropriated. You can see where the budget is and what the appropriation was last year. It's $200,000 appropriation, but even though we requested 1.2 million, but I will say, Mr. Carpentina, Ms. McKim have been really good to work with, and they've been effective in kind of helping us meet the needs in the district. These are major projects. I really think the town has a vested interest in keeping the facilities, which are owned by the taxpayers, in good shape. The West Hill roof is approaching 30 years. That's coming down the pike. That's going to need to be replaced. We have major windows, doors, and upgrades that need to be done at Stevens. That's an aging facility. We have an HVAC project, about $2.8 million there. The front canopy at GMS is kind of ugly, to be honest with you. Probably needs to be replaced at some point. It's the overhang there. We would like to update the tech ed and media classrooms at the middle school. And we're 2/3 of the way through the science projects. We've completed grade 8 and grade 7, with grade 6 planned for the summer. So major projects total a little under $8 million coming down the pike. In terms of the CIP, we want to maintain indoor air quality, keep our energy use efficient, keep the spaces clean and attractive while minimizing property damage. And we want to avoid repairs to HVAC equipment, roofing systems, and so forth. So at a certain point, when things start to break down, you start, just like in your home, you start to deal with unplanned emergency costs. So it's better, I think, to stay proactive. Our CIP for next year specifically, we're asking for about $1.5 million. 700,000 of that would be dedicated to the HVAC project at Stevens. The design fees for the West Hill roof, we estimate they're coming in at about 100,000. We would like to install a safety man trap, if you understand what that is, at GMS. It's a double entry system, so you get in through the first door. You still have to be let in through a second set of doors to either access the building or the office. It's the only school right now where we don't have that. This actually came in handy a few weeks ago at Stevens. Someone who shouldn't have been in the building attempted to enter. It was a parent that didn't have the right to see the child, and the man trap worked as effective. The individual was not able to access the building, and our colleagues here in blue came over and did what they needed to do and escorted the person off the property. So it worked as designed. We want to see that at the middle school. Talked about the science classrooms. That's grade 6 specifically. 2 rooms there. Tech Ed and Media Center, those are design fees for $50,000. We would like to have bleachers on the athletic side for big football games, other events. We have received some commentary about not having visitors' bleachers. The pool, actually, the town, we're very pleased, is planning on doing the grouting at the high school pool this summer, the grout work and the tiling. What we're looking to do is replace pumps for that high school pool. And there's $100,000 in there for systemic district-wide classroom furniture. Some of the furniture is getting quite old at West Hill and Stevens, GMS, and we need to start replacing things. So, share some highlights with you from the past year. West Hill School is a school of distinction, achieved that ranking based on very high academic performance. We have a student who qualified for a national math contest at Penn State. Very proud of that young person. Our flag guard, winter guard, placed fourth in the state this year. Marching band placed first in the regional contest at Lyman Hall. And they went to the nationals for the first time this year and came in 12th place. Good performance by those guys. Our math team at the high school placed second in the Capital Region Math League. It's a Hartford area, and was ranked as the #1 small public high school in the state. 2 of our middle school kids are math Olympians. This year we had 11 kids in the graduating class who qualified for the Seal of Biliteracy. That's demonstrating proficiency in a second language. We have a kid in Latin who did it. We have a kid who did it in Chinese. We have 5 or 6 kids in Spanish and a handful of kids in Hindi. So we're really proud of those kids. You're familiar with our Dream Academy. It's been a very, very impressive start. Those students are finishing their 18 to 22 education here in Rocky Hill, getting opportunities to interact with the public. Mimi, I've seen you in there several times.
Yep.
I know I've seen Prakash in there. The mayor met me there on several occasions. Really positive program, great feedback from the community. We're the only school in the state, GMS, to get the Michaels Cup Award for Unified Sports. 1 winner per year. It's Griswold Middle. And 1 of 3 to get the Spirit of Inclusion Award for Unified Sports for Rocky Hill High School. In terms of athletics, important for me, we got a Sportsmanship Award in boys soccer. Our coach for girls soccer, Anne Marie Catania, was just inducted into the Connecticut Coaches Hall of Fame. State championship in boys cross country, division champions last spring in baseball and girls tennis. Again, SAT scores, I shared those already, but 520 in math, 516, those are mean scores, well above the state average. 15 of our kids, this test was only a few weeks ago, made a 700 or higher in math, which is really impressive, and 17 on the verbal, above 700. So we're really stressing the achievement and really proud of these kids. Most recent data on cohort graduation, almost 97% of kids. Most of our kids who don't graduate on time are those kids in that 18 to 22 group. They get another 4 years of school. And you just see there's a wide range of schools here, national profile, kids that competing and getting accepted to Ivy League. Got a kid going to Trinity College in Ireland, local universities as well, UConn, Quinnipiac, Springfield. So the point is that kids that come to school and they take it seriously, they can compete for college admissions all across the country. Our overall budget summary, talked about the 5.41%, but we have some good information. We are finalizing a change in insurance carriers to Anthem, so we can reduce that number by $921K. So that brings us down to a 3.62 budget. Just finalized that number this past week. And you always ask, so I put it on the slide. We're projecting about $250,000 to maybe $275,000 that we would return to the town on June 30th if you could support our 3.62 request. If you go below that, I will go back to the board and recommend how they can spend the money on non-personnel items.
We're going
I
to
was telling you
frame that slide.
What?
We're going to frame that slide.
Yeah, there you go. So, I'm confident if you could support the 3.6, we will be able to get a check to the town on June 30th. In that range, we will, that number is still a moving number as we close out the year. So that's the presentation. Thank the board members that are here tonight, my staff that came tonight to help us out. We think we do a good job for the kids in Rocky Hill and the families, and we're happy to take your questions.
Well, I just want to start off by thanking you, Dr. Zito, and the entire board and your entire staff and crew, because we recognize what a tremendous, tremendous district that you run, and the accolades that we receive, annually just really justify the time that we spend trying to fund the projects that you feel are important to the district, and we certainly want to partner with you to do that so that you can continue to be such an excellent district. So we greatly appreciate your work.
Yeah, question, thank you. I'd just like to echo the mayor's comments. I won't add or subtract. Those were well stated. With respect to capital, on the municipal side, a few years ago, they adopted a program where all types of infrastructure components are labeled and put onto a schedule for maintenance, repair, et cetera. So it's a very proactive rather than reactive approach to anticipating, major capital expenditures. And can you explain, is something comparable in place on the Board of Ed side?
Yes, our CIP goes out 5 years, Chuck? Projected 5-year?
Actually 10, but
10?
5 is the most.
5 is the more reliable portion. 10 is kind of a long-range guess. But yes, so we lay a lot of this out. So, for example, with the West Hill roof, what we're asking to do next year is design it and potentially address it in the following year. So we meet on a regular basis with our facilities committee. But, as I just stated, we lay out a strategic plan for 5 years and then even further beyond into year 10.
We also meet with the town on a,
You got to go to the microphone. I'm sorry. Oh, you probably have one, Chuck, on the seat next to you.
Here you go.
So, yeah.
Yeah, we also get together with the town on, I believe, a quarterly basis to discuss our CIP and where we are and, if there are any changes that we've initially put together and just have those types of discussions. Keep it open.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I have a few questions. Dr. Zito, again, echoing what the mayor said and Councilor said here, like nothing to add or subtract. I think you guys do a great job in terms of student outcomes. I would like to focus on a couple of things. You said like the final number here, 3.62, that does not include the CIP though, right?
No,
the one
CIP
which Mayor
is-
wanted to frame. That's right.
CIP is a separate appropriation.
Okay, so if I can focus on the CIP and that slide you had, if you can pull that up.
Sure.
And because that's a big chunk, obviously, and I would like to understand the prioritization, some of it piggybacking on what the councilor said before. In terms of prioritization, this list, does it reflect your priorities from top to bottom? Is it in order or not so
No, I
much?
mean, it's those are the priorities. I would say everything on there is important. That's why it's next year.
Sure.
So I would rank the priorities, we can provide you with a long-range CIP. The top priorities are year to year. So everything
Yeah.
here is a priority. Then you get into year 2, that's something we think would be the next set of priorities, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was going to focus on the next year one. That's the page, right? And so on that one, obviously the roof is the HVAC is the top one. And then
The
going-
HVAC at Stevens is the most expensive.
Yeah.
I would say the science labs are critical too, because we've already done 2/3 of that work.
Okay, and can you also shed some light on like how did the last year's budget impact this year's budget from a CIP perspective?
You want to talk about that? I mean, the reduction was to 200,000, so.
Right.
Yeah, if you want to come up and
Sure.
check, thank you.
We were able to, through the capital non-recurring account, which is a carryover. Typically, if we do have a surplus, we typically come to the town council and ask that, those funds be possibly put into the capital non-recurring account. So those dollars can go towards the CIP when, when we don't get the budget request that we anticipated. And that's really worked out well because, it gives us a little incentive to have those savings and to put them back into our capital projects. That's worked out really well. So, we do with what we can based on what we receive. And, we've been able to complete phase 1 of our HVAC project over at Stevens. That particular project, if you look at the CIP now, it's stretched over, I believe, a 4-year period, at $700,000 at a chunk. We did apply for a state grant. Typically, HVAC projects are not reimbursable by the state, but they had a special program in place where they did have some funds available for reimbursement, so we applied. We're still awaiting to see if we get that, those dollars that we can put towards that project. We did finish the second phase of our science classrooms at GMS, so we're on the last phase now. So I think it's worked out well. We don't get the two main large projects that we need to get done are the HVAC and the roof at West Hill, because the roof at West Hill is, as you saw, close to 30 years old now. So we definitely got our money's worth there. And, we just don't want to go beyond a certain point, because after that, then you start incurring costs that we could have avoided if we didn't do it.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get, some sense of, the prioritization on those things.
Right.
So thank you. One quick thing I noticed, and you can probably clarify. I got a pie chart from Mona, and it says 1 million on the CIP on this one.
Okay.
But you had 1.5 here for the next year.
Yeah.
I don't know, Mona, if I'm.
I'll respond to that.
Thank you.
When we sat with the Board of Ed and said if we could we have the present level this year is 200,000. The 1 million would be the increase in our budget. And as we sat together and they have 1.5, they would have been very happy to even see us accomplish that. So I'm sure they would have loved to see the 1.5.
Right.
But if we came with a 1.2 in comparison to the 200,000 they had that last year, we agreed at the table. That would be nice.
Okay.
That would be a nice thing. By the way, I know you mentioned non-reoccurring. Just keep in mind that that's at a 0 now because we did the project.
Right.
So we don't run to non-recurring next year.
Okay. No, that's great. Thank
Okay.
you. I was just trying to reconcile the numbers I'm looking at too many numbers, I guess. But so that's one. And then the second thing I wanted to ask you, from the staffing perspective, I would assume I had the same question for Mona. Is that mostly contractual? You're built into your contracts for teachers, right? Essentially, a lot of that. The 1.5 I'm talking about now, that big bucket, right?
Yeah. The bulk of our staffing is the various bargaining groups that we have: the teachers, the custodians, the paraeducators, administrators, nurses. So the bulk of the very small amount of our staff is non-bargaining unit.
Okay. And so since I'm on staffing, and this could be either one of you, about the 2 vice principals and also the loss of the math coordinator. And I call it a loss because from where I sit, I feel like you're doing excellent. Our school system is doing excellent in terms of math scores, as you exhibited here, in their presentation. And I feel like getting rid of a math coordinator is like saying we are doing really awesome on defense, so we are going to get rid of our defensive coordinator and hire an offensive coordinator because we are doing so well that we don't need defense anymore. If that makes sense from a football analogy perspective.
I don't disagree with you. So if you want to add 134,000 to the 3.62, I'd recommend that the board
Yeah, and if
reinstate. That would be
yeah.
great.
Yeah, if I can have everything I want for Christmas.
100% agree with you. It's you saw the numbers in special education, the increase. It's becoming increasingly difficult. We're one of very few school districts that doesn't have an assistant principal in each building. Almost all of them do in this area. And the needs are just really, really intense. So we didn't want to reassign the math coordinator, but we reassigned that person to the middle school vice principal next year. We had a retirement there. it's a way of trying to keep costs down, to be honest with you.
No, I
It's not an
totally-
easy decision.
No, I completely understand, like, you have to make choices. But the reason I'm asking, like, the bigger, broader context of it,
Yeah.
like, because we are adding positions and we are getting rid of, like, something which is going to academics. That's all I'm
It is, but
arguing for.
it's becoming, you know, I could argue that the vice principals at the elementary schools are supporting academics too, because there's too much going on in the schools now for one administrator to run the entire operation. Handle every crisis that comes up, handle the teacher evaluations, lead instruction, evaluate the entire staff. It's becoming really, really a big, big demand, and it was different 10, 12 years ago.
Sure. So one last thing on that. Is that work which was a math coordinator was doing, and I'm sure like it was not insignificant,
No,
is that
not
work
at
going to
all.
be reassigned to someone else?
Going to have to look within our central office to make sure that the work continues in the right direction. We still have 2 administrators in the curriculum department. You know, we're going to have to look at all those things. Not an easy choice.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
But you have a plan to
Yeah,
reassign
we
some of
do.
that work which was being done there.
We do have a plan, yeah.
Okay. And on the same, in the same vein, can you shed some light, Dr. Zito, on like the new position for the Dream Academy? And we can start with like how are those numbers looking, because now you have some data coming out of there, right, for the
Right.
last couple of months. Can you tell us like the financial picture there, if you will? How does it look like? How much revenue you're generating? Things like that.
Revenue, roughly 500 a week is what we've been told at this point. Is that right?
No,
What, per week?
per week.
Yeah.
It's too new to really have.
Please, just for the record, because otherwise it won't get recorded. That's all. Sorry about that.
So unfortunately, I really can't give you a lot of information on those data at this point. It's too new. We're looking at that. We could have one day where it's $400. We could have one day where it's $200. So we're still really evaluating that. It's doing quite well. And, I can get a report because we do, Chuck, we send monthly reports, right? We send monthly reports to your office? Yeah. So we do have monthly reports, so we can get you some of that information, but it's really only been open really for like 2 months. So
Sure.
it's just too new to really provide that. And I do want to be cautious because the purpose is really for the students. And just, I know Dr. Zito had said, when I came to the district 7 years ago, the students we had enrolled in this program were being outplaced at up to $200,000 to $300,000 a student.
Sure.
We have 8 students, projecting 10 students next year. If that was still happening, that number would be much higher than 3.6. It would be much, much higher. So you kind of have to think of it like that. But I can get you some more information.
Yeah, that'll be great. And then on the same topic, is that position an administrative position, or is it a non-administrative position? I guess
It's not. It's non-affiliated. Yeah, it's not the person is not in the administrator contract.
So they're counted as a teacher,
No.
if you will.
Non-certified personnel.
Okay.
It's a unique position. Remember, that person is working 40 hours a week. It's a 12-month job, dealing with the health department. When you serve food in a public venue,
Sure.
you have to meet all of the health requirements, all the building requirements, supervising the students. You've got an espresso machine in there, a couple 100 degrees. You've got stoves. You've got to have a professional person. This person used to run a restaurant, owned a restaurant, that understands all the aspects of what's going on to ensure safety and be compliant with the building code. So it's not like I can go take a line cook out of a restaurant and put a person in there and go, oh, this guy does, he's a short order cook, he'll run it.
Yeah.
No, I need someone who knows the whole operation, purchasing all the supplies, safety, public health, all those factors.
No, that's understandable. And I think to your earlier point, I mean, the purpose of the Dream Cafe is not to generate profit. I get
Right.
that. I'm just trying to look at the economics vis-a-vis the budget.
I look at it, I mean, the expenses there are, I would look at it like I would look at a technology education program where maybe the kids are learning how to design and build Adirondack chairs. yeah, we're going to take some revenue in when we sell those chairs, but it's not the purpose of the program. The purpose is to give these kids an opportunity to work with the public and learn some vocational skills. So at 22, kids who may have Down syndrome or other significant challenges, significant autism, other types of issues, that they can actually go get a job instead of returning home and sitting in the basement and watching TV, which historically has been the path for a lot of these kids. We're trying to offer something different.
Understood. One last question I have, and this is wearing my public safety hat plus my counselor hat in general, is the school security. And I think you talked about a little bit about the door there, the trap door. And can you paint a picture, Dr. Zito, of like, what does it look like today from a security perspective in terms of the dollars you're spending on that particular need, I guess. And I'll give you the context for this. A few weeks ago, or a couple of months ago, I wanted to, there was a lot of calls. And unfortunately, whenever a shooting happens somewhere, it's an unfortunate situation in our country. And so the parents get very much concerned, just like me, right? I'm a parent as well. I have a son in the school system. So I set up a meeting, public safety meeting, and we wanted to get a good view of what our safety protocols, safety investments, if you will, look like from the school's perspective, right? And some of that, we get it from Chief Klett here, but some of the missing picture there is from the school side. So I just want to take this opportunity to see if you can paint a picture for me of how are we spending our taxpayer dollars on keeping our kids safe from any violent crime, I guess.
So the main thing that's being spent are the salaries for the 3 police officers. That's your first line of defense, your best investment. They do a great job. We appreciate the fact that the council funds 3 full-time police officers who are highly visible, who cover our schools. All our schools are covered at dismissal and arrival. They're regular. Like I said, we had an intruder a couple of weeks ago. Immediate response. Beyond that, you have what I call hardening the infrastructure. So you have your buzzer locks, your access for staff where they have to code into the building. Anyone else coming into any of the schools has to be buzzed in by staff. There's cameras set up so they can see who's at the door. People are asked to identify themselves. Other than GMS, every building has one of those man traps and one access point. We have cameras which help with surveillance, but also with investigation of situations that may have occurred, vandalism, for example, things like that. Updated locks in all the buildings, the Alice drills, so we're practicing how to respond to an intruder. Anything I missed, Ron? Updated voice over IP. So when I came to the district, West Hill and Stevens didn't have operational PA systems. So if there's a problem, you couldn't make an announcement. It was, like Charlie Brown's teacher or something. There's a crazy noise coming through and people couldn't hear anything. And now everything, if there's an emergency, heaven forbid, we have updated public address systems. All those things were addressed by the board over the last 10, 12 years. I know we had a former board member here, Mr. Dillon, ran for the board to upgrade the facilities. It was a big priority for him.
Yeah, and I think just kind of burdening that down, that conversation, and then I will let others ask questions. I took too much of our council's time. But in terms of technology, is there anything else you have looked at? Obviously, the infrastructure, which is great, like all those enhancements. Anything else you have looked at in recent years, which you wish, from a technological perspective, you can put in schools to make our parents feel safer for the children?
Well, I haven't talked about what we do have in place with it's called the Go Guardian system. So we get alerts if a child is looking at a topic they shouldn't be looking at, for example, suicide, things like that. So certain keywords will trigger, and our tech department will be able to notify the principal. So if kids are on our devices and they're looking at potentially doing harmful things, there is a triggering system that we have in place to keep those kids safe. In terms of other tech aspects for safety, I mean, cameras do wear out over time, and they fail over time. So it'd be important to make sure we continue to update those. But the overall approach is significantly more robust than, say, 10, 12 years ago. And I would say the triggering point was Sandy Hook
Of course.
Elementary. And then if you remember, that spring, there was the marathon bombing in Boston. So Sandy Hook was December 14th of 2012. The following spring in 2013, we had the marathon situation. And that's what really the board and the council took a hard look at. We got the SROs in the following year, and we started really aggressively hardening the infrastructure. We were successful on 3, and we just got money for a 4th security grant. Governor Malloy started that program following Sandy Hook. So all the things I talked about, the buzzer locks, the man-trap system, the surveillance systems, the keyless entry for staff. I wear this thing everywhere to set the example for staff. You need to have your ID on at all times when you're working. All those things were assisted through state funding, and the town did a great job supporting those projects as well.
Yeah, and we'll continue to support that as and when you need that support. And I think it's great that you
Can't understate the SROs enough. They are fantastic.
Of course.
Partners. There are some people in this state that want to get cops out of schools. I would advocate that those people, if they're in the state legislature, should give up the LOB security if they're going to take that position, because I disagree vehemently with it. We need to keep our kids safe, and at least in this community, the police are embraced by our families.
Thank you, Dr. Zito. And Chuck, thank you so much.
I just want to echo the praise for the quality of our school system. And fortunately, most of my questions have been asked, but I do want to give a plug for the Dream Cafe. As Dr. Zito said, I'm there
You're a regular,
every
Mimi.
week.
Yeah.
And when you see how these kids, the strides they have made since February,
Yeah.
it's just amazing. They can deal with the public. Some of them were very shy at first.
Yeah,
and
they were
now
terrified to
greet
interact
us
with
when
the
we
public,
come
yeah.
in. They do their tasks. And some of them, a couple of them work at the Community Senior Center and a couple other places. So the system works, and I highly recommend that everybody support the Dream Cafe.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe.
Kudos to the
We
system for
appreciate your
initiating it.
being a regular patron. I know the kids smile when they see you. And your
I love
husband,
them.
too.
They're great
Yeah.
kids.
I had one comment. Again, Dave Savini here.
Hey, Dave.
Thank you, Dr. Zito and the whole board. I couldn't concur more with what everybody said. I do have one question on the Dream Academy. I know we're not looking at it as a revenue stream, but we talk about saving money so that we don't have to send our 18 to 22-year-olds to another district. Do we receive money, or do we receive students from outside of our district that we in turn would get revenue back for their participation in our program?
We are open to that. We're well aware that that could be a possibility. We would certainly do it. We would charge tuition. What I could tell you is a couple of school districts have already called to ask about how we're doing this. I think the Wethersfield, at least some members of the board came in one day just to scout us out and say, how'd you pull this off? But to answer your question, yes, we would be open to taking tuition students. Again, depending on space. It's not a huge area there, but certainly something we could look at. I mean, ideally, long range, I would recommend that the town potentially look at building a new site for the Pathways program and the Dream Academy, including the Dream Cafe, because we're renting that facility right now. So it's something you may want to consider long range. I think it would be.
And then feedback on that, Dr. Zito. How about the earlier grades? And obviously, we have a banner program. Do we receive out-of-town participation as well? And I assume we would charge tuition if they were using our resources.
Yeah, we don't take any students on a tuition basis. We have in the past, very limited. We have a small number of open choice students from Hartford. We do receive funding for those kids through a state grant, but it's very small, and it's unusual to take kids on a tuition basis. But we've done it in the past. And again, it does, the charge for a typical student is the per pupil expense. It would be about 19,000. So if most people are living, in a different town, they're not going to pay 19,000 to send their kid to Rocky Hill when they are in Berlin, and they can just send their kid based on what they're paying in taxes.
Then forgive me for not understanding this. If we send somebody outside, because we're saving roughly a big number,
Yeah.
if we didn't have the Dream Academy, who pays that tuition? The resident or the
We do.
parent of the student, or do
No.
we?
The board bears the cost. So if we outplace a student, and we have a couple outplaced kids that are close to $300,000, that falls on the board. There's a state reimbursement program. It's fairly complicated, but it's called the excess cost program. And essentially, we have to reach a threshold about 4.5 times the tuition, so it's roughly $86,000. Then you look at the delta. So if it's a $300,000 kid, you're looking at the delta there of $214,000, and we ultimately get back about 70% of that difference in state funding. But you're still on the hook for the missing 30% plus the original $86,000. So it's still very expensive for some of these high-cost kids when we outplace them.
Right. So it's very important to keep them here. So what do other towns do? Where do they send them if they
Well,
don't have the
if
facility?
you saw the special ed slide, it's one of the reasons why we're so efficient in terms of only spending 21% of our budget on special education. Some of those other towns are up to 30%. So I suspect they've got more outplacements. They're not dealing
Yep.
with their costs as effectively. So, that was, the top reason, Mr. Savini, to build the program at the Dream Cafe was to get the kids educated in their town. But certainly a strong second incentive was to save taxpayer dollars.
Correct. I love that priority. And then just down the road, our special ed enrollment and not primary English language enrollment is going up at, I'd call it almost an alarming pace right now.
Yes.
Can you provide color on why that's happening?
Yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword. I think we offer great programming here, and we know that people have told us, I moved to Rocky Hill because I have a special needs child, and you guys do a great job with the kids. So I kind of look at it as a good problem to have. It speaks volumes about our staff and our board and the way our town. I mean, you're involved in athletics, Dave, and look at the Challenger program here. Look at the Unified program here. Look, this town built Miracle Field. So, you have a community here that you should take great pride in the fact that these students are embraced by everybody in town. Ms. Thoreau talked about it at the Dream Cafe, but I think about Challenger baseball. I think about the Miracle Field. I think about all the awards we got in unified sports. People see that. They see caring teachers. And to be very candid, we've had many people say, I moved here because I have a special needs child. And I think that says a lot about Rocky Hill, but there is a cost with that.
Yep. Well, again, I appreciate the work you do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, thanks, Dr. Zito, for all the work everyone's done. This is my 7th time hearing your presentation. Every year I enjoyed all the more.
Thank you.
So thanks for and I echo your sentiments about the SRO, not just for the reasons you said, but also for some of these students. I'm sure it's kind of the first kind of relationship with a police officer, and it's a great way to kind of get them on the right foot. So it's really a
They're doing some great things. We have an initiative, Coloring with the Cops at Mosier School. We've got Officer Jordan started Football Fridays. He'll pull patrol, will come in for 10 minutes and jump out, and they're flinging the football around with Officer Jordan and the kids. I mean, the kids really, really embrace our police department. And they help them with tough situations, too. I remember years ago, Sergeant Carta working with one kid who was really having some issues, and she was the one that was just getting that kid on the right track. So they do an excellent job.
Yeah, no, it's terrific. And I enjoy the comparison to the other towns that you bring us every year. Just so we understand, when we talk about the DRG categories, what does that mean? How do you distinguish?
DRG stands for District Reference Group.
Yeah.
So the town groups the state. It's 166 districts in Connecticut, and they're grouped A through H. So we have 24. We're in Group D. So they base it on similar economic profiles. So your DIRG A, your District Reference Group A, would be your your wealthiest towns in the state. New Canaan, Darien, most of those Gold Coast towns, all the way down to H, which would be the, your urban districts where there's high levels of poverty. So we're grouped in with 23 other towns with a similar economic profile: Cromwell, Weathersfield, Berlin, Newington. Those are our neighbors in the same economic group. Some wealthier towns in our region, Group B. So that would be Simsbury, Avon, South Windsor, Granby. So if that makes sense to you.
Yeah,
And
no,
you can
absolutely.
find that information on the state website too, and
Okay.
if you want, I can send you the link to it.
Yeah, no, it's, just to give everybody a snapshot, that's great. One strange, and this is just curious if you know, it's really nothing to do with Rock Hill, but South Windsor's per pupil spending is like
It is
lower than
low,
everybody.
yeah.
I mean, not just for
Yeah, it's
everybody.
impressive.
Is there? Are they calculating something differently? Because it just
No, the
seems so out of whack
calculations,
with
those
everybody
are consistent.
else.
We draw those from, the state does the calculations. Their enrollment went up,
Yeah, their enrollment's been,
climbing significantly,
Okay, so yeah, because there's got to be some
without a
mathematical.
corresponding increase in staffing.
right, well,
Yeah.
yeah, at some point it levels off, but.
Yeah, obviously, if your enrollment goes up,
Right.
the math, your costs come down if you don't dramatically increase staffing, so.
Right, yeah.
They have been spiking a little bit too. We were one of the fastest growing districts in the state about 5-6 years ago. We have leveled off.
Yep. No, great. Yeah, I figured some sort of mathematical anomaly there. Can you just talk quickly about the $200,000 for property services? And now that's different than CIP. So
Yeah,
is that more of a
Ryan,
maintenance
what about
type of
that?
program, or?
Got that?
Yeah, the big item that's generating that increase is state legislation required school districts to do basically a study on all their HVAC equipment. So, that we went out to some vendors to get some quotes to see where we would fall on that, and I think that totaled $130,000. So that's what's really driving that number up.
Okay, understood. Great. Okay, thank you. And this question is probably more for Mona, I'm guessing, but when Dr. Zito spoke at the end about potentially returning $250,000, $275,000 to the town, how does that work from a budget perspective? Does that get added to the fund balance, or I forgot exactly how that?
Well, I would imagine it depends on how he writes that letter when he returns it, because he could return it to the town and it would go to fund balance and we would let it stay there and we'd build fund balance. Although we know historically, we've seen it return with the request to take all or a portion of it and put it to non-reoccurring, and that would help him put something toward the 1.5 million. So I think it depends on the directive that we get.
Okay, so,
Yeah, I mean, from a legal and statutory standpoint, on June 30th, when we return it to the town, it belongs to the town. I have no say on how to spend it or go to the board and ask them to spend it. Until June 30th, they legally control those funds. We historically ask that it be put into the capital non-recurring, and the town has been really good about that and working with us to upgrade facilities. But again, those are town assets, so you have a vested interest as a resident, as a council member, to make sure your buildings are in good shape. So, we're happy when we can return money to the town. It shows we're being efficient, and we appreciate the support when we address our capital projects.
great. Okay, well, thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zito, and your whole staff for doing a great job with our school system. Just a little off the subject about the Dream Academy. Where'd that idea come from?
That actually came from our former chairman, Mr. Dillon, who asked me a couple years ago. He said, "Hey, can we, have a dialogue about what we're doing with kids with severe disabilities when they turn 18? We know we keep them until they're 22, but could there be an opportunity for them to really get some vocational skills?" So we started to do some research, and we found, and Mr. Cosker's been out there, we found a coffee shop in Avon called Beans and Company, started by a woman with a child with Down syndrome. And the operating philosophy is 50% of her staff is disabled adults, 50% are typical adults without disabilities. And the idea was these kids are capable of a lot, and they should get more when they turn 22 and move beyond the school system than sitting at home on the couch. There should be an opportunity to get out there and interact and be a meaningful part of the community. So that kind of generated the idea. We had a number of conversations with the owner of Beans and Company, Ms. Stevenson, our assistant superintendent for special education, took a field trip out there, and we came back with this concept, presented it to Mr. Dillon and the rest of the board, and said, we think we could do something similar here in Rocky Hill for the kids. And, you know, I think it's exceeded our expectations, to be honest with you.
No, I'm just very pleased with great out-of-the-box thinking, as they say, and thanks for you guys all following through with it. And
Thank you.
it is definitely helping the individual, and on the other token, like you say, it's helping the town, saving money by
Absolutely.
not policing them out. So thanks for that. The vice principal positions you're asking for, what would be the salary of them?
About $134,000.
What benefits are they going to be relieving the principal with?
Well, right now, it's becoming very difficult to run the school with one administrator. You've got constant issues that just develop. Parents show up. There was an argument over custody. An angry parent walks in the door. You're getting pulled. You can't predict some of these things. What you can predict is all the staff evaluations that need to be done, being visible in the classroom, all the PPT meetings. Those are special ed planning and placement team meetings. You've seen the increase. These positions are actually being designed as assistant principals on a 0.5 basis. The other portion of the job is special ed supervisor because those numbers have doubled. So a lot of work with special education. Those meetings are required by law. Every kid has an annual meeting. Emergency meetings are called constantly when there's issues. And, you know, I can assure you they're going to be very, very busy people. I didn't like trading out the math coordinator, but I was trying to do everything I could. I have to make tough choices every year with a budget. We're trying to balance and have a minimal impact on the town because we respect the situation the taxpayers are in as well. Yeah. Sure.
I'm not sure if you're all familiar with the bullying legislation, but that's a huge piece of this as well, because bullying investigations are so time consuming and they're very frequent. And it often involves having to interview multiple students, watch videotapes of the bus, of the cafeteria, of recess. It's very time consuming. There's also legislation that every time a child is restrained 4 times, you have to have a PPT. So we have students that happens to, and you have to have PPTs, along with the annual reviews, along with any time a parent requests a PPT, you have to have one. So the amount of PPTs, the amount of bullying investigations, teacher evaluations, and just normal operations is just becoming completely unmanageable for one person to do in schools of 400 students. So I can assure you there will be plenty for them to do. There's also, Dr. Zito showed you the enrollment. What he didn't include in the enrollment is about 40 to 50 students that don't attend our schools that we're still fiscally responsible for. And those students need PPTs. Those students have restraints. Those students have transportation issues. We're watching videos constantly. So it's very, very busy, and the assistant principals will be very busy, I promise.
Thank you.
Why isn't that number reflected?
Because those kids they're not enrolled in Rocky Hill, but we're still responsible. So they're resident children who might be attending a magnet school, for example. They don't count towards our, the 2,500 number I gave you.
Mm-hmm.
But we still have the fiscal and legal responsibility. We pay
Gotcha.
a portion of the tuition. If they're in a magnet school, the state picks up a portion. But when it comes time to manage the special education aspect, that falls back on Rocky Hill.
Wow.
So we schedule the PPT. We have to physically have an administrator in attendance at the PPT. These are important meetings because decisions get made that have a financial impact. You may have a magnet school recommending that a child get a one-on-one paraprofessional.
Right.
And we have a say in that process, but we have to be represented at those meetings.
So is this where that argument, the money should follow the child, sort of stems from? Is it easier under that model, do you think, from an administrative standpoint? Would that alleviate some of?
Well, if the responsibility followed the child too, but it
Right,
doesn't.
well, I would think it
Currently,
would, right, but I think that it would if the
Local
money
education.
followed it, then,
If the money followed the child and we were completely off the hook on the management piece,
yeah.
be something that'd be interesting to look at. But right now, we're not. So we have to deal with the current reality of the responsibility.
Seems so
still there.
disjointed.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It does.
Thank you.
Dr. Zito, one quick thing, piggybacking on Councilor Whalen's question. Is there any data you looked at for other towns, similar towns in Dirk D, who have vice principals?
Virtually every one of them does at their elementary schools. We actually had Amy's office prepared a report, and we shared that earlier this year. It's virtually every district. Berlin, for example, assistant principal in every elementary school. Newington, they all do. So
Have these discipline problems gotten worse in the past few years, or is it?
I think COVID has a factor. I think it's a needier population. I think we're seeing behaviors. You know, we had one of our elementary principals. We talked about this last winter with the board. So, you know, at his particular school, historically, 10, 12 years ago, there might have been 3 or 4 high leverage kids that he knew every day we're going to be dealing with 3 or 4 kids that are going to be having some significant issues. Now that might be 12 or 14 kids. So to Amy's point, a couple of those situations can eat up your entire day. I mean, we've got this going on at the high school too, but we have a vice principal there. You know, got called the other day about a kid, you know, whacking another kid in the back of the head. These things happen, and it's hours of time for the principal to call in the witnesses, investigate, contact the parents involved, deal with the disciplinary issues, significant things. So it's very, very time consuming. And that, again, we can't predict, you know, it would be great if you could predict these things, but you can't predict an angry parent coming in saying, I'm going through a divorce and I need to speak to the principal now because something just happened at home. This happens on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, totally understood. I just wish you can reassign some of the work the math coordinator is doing, because I really think I would hate to lose this momentum you have going here with your outcomes. And just because we are doing well, I just feel a little nervous about taking off a person like who's hopefully doing a good job and is reflected in these outcomes.
Bump us up above 3.6, just a little, and I'll work with you on it.
Well,
Okay, I think let's let it go now. I think
Yes.
you've made your point several times.
we're
Okay, if you want to give him the money, give him the money, and that's the end of the day.
yeah, maybe it can be reassigned.
so-
Maybe it's not like that's the point
All
I'm
right,
trying to
anyone
make. And
else?
I think you understand that.
Thank you.
I have just one last question. I don't know what PPT is. Could you
So
explain what that
that's
stands for?
that stands for Planning and Placement Team.
Okay.
So every student that qualifies and is identified with a disability gets they get an individual education plan. So each child has their own personalized education plan with a series of goals. It also outlines the services. So you may have a child who's getting social work services, speech therapy, occupational therapy, potentially physical therapy, time with a special ed teacher, X number of hours per week, potentially support from a paraprofessional. Those are all laid out in that individual plan for that child. The PPT is the Planning and Placement Team meeting. So that's where the IEP is developed and discussed. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Every child is required to have an annual PPT. So all 430 of those kids have an annual meeting. Those meetings typically could be anywhere from 1 to 3 hours long. It's times 430 kids. In addition, as Ms. Stevenson said, certain things will trigger a PPT. For restraints on a kid, mandatory PPT. Significant behavioral situation that could result in a suspension, we have to have what's called a manifestation hearing. We have to determine whether or not the behavior was caused by the child's disability. It's another type of special ed meeting that happens. Parent requests an emergency meeting. Change in behavior, change in medication from the pediatrician, something going on at home. Parent can always request an emergency PPT. We have to comply with that request. We also deal with we haven't even talked about ESY, but we have a large number of our students who qualify for extended school year. So we run an entire program in the month of July for a good number of those special needs kids as well. So it's very intense work. These assistant principals will also be involved in those types of meetings as well, across the board. So again, it's a function of the change and the enrollment you saw. It's gone up 85% over the last 11 years.
Thank you so much.
And from what I understand, it's not just the time of the meeting, but there's a lot of prep work to go
A lot of
to that
prep work,
meeting.
yeah. I mean,
It's probably longer than the meeting itself.
Not just that, but in many of these meetings, we're reviewing evaluations that are time-consuming. Psychological evaluation, IQ testing, academic performance testing. Social worker may have to do a screening on a kid. All of these types of things. The occupational therapist is going to provide a report on the kid's progress. So to your point, thank you for asking the question, there's a lot of prep work in advance of these meetings before you get to the meeting to start reviewing where the child is, and a lot of work that comes out of these meetings in terms of, we're going to do this test, we're going to add this, we need to hire a paraprofessional, we need to increase service with a social worker, whatever the issue is. So a lot of pre-work and post-work coming from those meetings.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to B, Public Safety, subsection B, Health District.
Be done by the time I get there.
What is that under in here?
No, he didn't want to come in. So he's just
The Health and Human
based on the
Services.
formula.
Yeah, it's under health in here. It's not under. And our agenda is public safety, but here it's under.
You want to take a break, Ray? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Make a motion for a brief recess.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
We're going to take a 5-minute recess. Okay, everyone, welcome back. We're going to get started with the second half of our budget workshop for May 2nd, and we are on budget review, public safety, subsection B2, health district.
Yes.
Okay.
The Health District, pretty straightforward. We get charged on a per capita basis. The new per capita charge went from $7.75 per capita to up to $8.25, which is a 6.45% increase, and that accounts for the $14,160.
Okay. That's through.
Yeah. All right, if there's nothing there, we're going to move on. Public safety, B3, police, subsection A, police administration.
Goal number one under police administration, ensure that the new division commanders attend leadership and management training on an ongoing basis. Education and training is a priority for Chief Collette. As is number two, goal number two, maintain and continue to achieve CALIA recertification status. And then you can see in the performance measures, standards reviewed by CALIA, and these figures of 112, these are actual standards. CALIA has 112 measurement standards, is what I can call them, that they evaluate departments by, and ours have been reviewed, and we have been successful in all. And then a number of policy changes and updates consistent with this past year.
So you're saying that we heard from that last CALIA review that was just
Yes.
done? Oh, congratulations.
Got a few zeros in the budget page. Full-time salaries, we have three. The chief, lieutenant, and the chief secretary. Under part-time, we have two part-time position animal control officers. We have one vacancy. And that's being advertised. Moving down, I imagine, uniforms and cleaning, that's for the cadets and the honor guard, basically. Materials and supplies, that's for award ceremonies, for cadet expenses and food and, plaques and things like that. Conference expenses, and again, CALIA expenses. And then we, dues and subscriptions to the Connecticut Police Chiefs Association, Capital Region Chiefs of Police, FBI, and New England Chiefs Association.
Next.
Question about why is the salaries increased on full-time employees so much?
In that particular one, you're going to have non-bargaining, which is a non-budgeted, so you're going to see one of those like unbudgeted covering for the current year, as well as the contract and steps. I know we don't want to hear contracts and steps, but I have to tell you, it is.
But these aren't members of a bargaining unit, or are they?
You will have a non-bargaining as well as, there's two other unions involved. There's a clerical union and then the police union as well.
Thank you.
I think I ask this every budget year, and I just don't remember the answer, frankly. So I'm sorry to repeat myself annually. But CROG has worked really hard on regionalizing a lot of services for municipalities, and we're, I think, one of 38 CROG municipalities, right, in our district, yeah. And so animal control always comes up in our meetings. And so I'm just wondering, what again is the rationale for not regionalizing that particular job?
I had approached the former chief of police to see if we wanted to join in, and he determined that our need was greater than relying on a couple of part-time, or maybe three. I'm not sure how many they were going to add CROG for this program, but on a CROG region, which is, as you said, it's a large land area, and at the time he was not in favor of that, so it just didn't get carried over.
Okay.
Just a
And
question.
I wondered,
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I wonder too how much of that is because we have a dog park, right? I don't know if every municipality has a dog park, but I do know like our probably takes up time and.
It's something we can look at for the future.
I'm sorry, Bill.
Yeah, no, thanks. Just on full-time salaries, can you explain why the actuals for the current year are so low?
Well, we started off with a chief that was a lieutenant at the same time. So we had I guess you would call it in a sense a vacancy. There was the overlaps. You had a period of time that there was not. You're looking on the projection?
Well, I'm looking at full-time salaries. I'm looking at the current fiscal year actual, and then the projection for the full current year of 227, which, compared to the almost 400,000 that was budgeted.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
so
I
please
think,
explain.
as I said, we had, in that particular line item, you would have a full-time lieutenant, a full-time chief, and a clerical position. So for the good part of the year, you did not have, well, we had a quasi, we had a lieutenant being a chief at the time, so it was almost one full salary not expended. As we now know who we have, and we've got lieutenants in place, I think the adopted could have that tweaked a little bit better. But when February came, we were still at the one position vacant.
So which one was treated as vacant? I mean, what was slotted in there, the lieutenant position or the chief position?
The vacant salary in the projection is the lieutenant piece.
Okay. But that still leaves a delta of almost $170,000. I mean, the budget was $394, and you're projecting only $227 expended from a lieutenant position that was vacant for just 2/3 of the year. I don't see how that saves that much money.
I can go back and dig into it. I know we're on police now, but we had an issue with that, the library, which I had mentioned at the break time, that we had a little bit of a glitch going on with the way the system is grabbing all the bargaining unit people and putting them in. So I'll look at that.
Yeah,
just to make sure.
but these aren't bargaining unit people, just the admin.
Right,
And
it'd be
that's
one
not-
admin, two bargaining unit, but I'm agreeing that looks a little
That's,
wonky.
yeah, that can't be right.
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
I'm
and-
looking at it, I'm getting the ick.
And then circling back again to the year over year, about a $71,000 increase, 18%.
Yeah.
Is this part of, again, what we discussed a couple of nights ago, that there was kind of accumulation of steps? Well, no, that's not right.
No,
Because these are not bargaining unit
yeah.
people except for the admin. So again, can you explain that dramatic an increase?
So what we'll do is on the non-bargaining, that you'll have, we don't budget the non-bargaining, but then the actual expenditure will come during the year. So you're seeing that effect. I
don't understand what you just said.
said. Believe me, it's fun. But so when we did the 23-24 budget, adopting that, it was not a plan to do increases for non-bargaining, for particular the chief. So we don't have any bargaining in that, so it stays flat. But when you go in for the upcoming year, we have given the increase during the year. So you've got an unbudgeted increase within that.
So for how many positions, the chief, and you said there's a lieutenant position in there as well?
Right, and then you have a clerical, which is unsettled at this point. So you got a little bit of everything in there.
That just looks like a big jump for 3 positions.
I can break it down. Like I said, I'd be more than happy to.
But we have 2 new lieutenants. Shouldn't that price be lower? Or are their salaries, or what did that come in?
Well, and again, remembering this thing was done in February before decisions were made and positions were filled. So it's definitely would adjust now that we have the people.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you'll-
And of course, only one lieutenant shows on this page. The others will go on the other pages. One's for admin, one will be
that's
the
right.
communication and patrol.
Thanks.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, you'll look into that and give us some more
Sure, I'll-
statistics, please.
Do you want to go to records?
Records of communication. Yep. Okay, the Records and Communication Division, they provide all of the communication across all town departments, townwide, Parks and Rec, you name it, highway, state police highway, regional access, communication, as well as all police, fire, medical. Goal number 1, they just maintain their continuity of their radio and communications network of all town agencies. Goal number 2, increase supervision and operational accountability within the communications center. Those 2 goals tie directly into the major change on the bottom, the addition of a communication supervisor. And as you can see, we also had a decrease in CALIA expenses. We have the performance measures.
Ray, just one quick question on the calls for service. The 40,000 anticipated, I mean, that breaks down to about, 110 calls per day. Is that actual calls where the call comes in, it's dispatched? Or is it just somebody calling up and asking, for directions or transfer to another department, inside the department, or anything like that?
I am looking at this figure as all calls coming into the dispatch center.
I'm just looking at calls for service.
Yes.
And
Yes.
calls coming into dispatch, sure, I can understand a high number, but actual calls for service where they take the call and they dispatch a police officer to the call.
I can't answer that.
Okay, I mean, again, it breaks down to about 110 per day, and I wouldn't imagine there's 110 on average dispatches to police officer.
I'll get that answer for you. And,
Okay,
yeah. Per
Thanks.
day.
Some of a similar question about full-time salaries, projection for fiscal year 745,000, and we're looking to get 962. Was there vacancy, or what's kind of driving? Also, it's a 12.3% increase, so.
This particular line item includes the proposed communication coordinator here.
But you had a question on the projection before we talk about the position? Did I follow?
It might be the same. Well, so the projection for 2024 is versus what's proposed for 25 is a difference of over 200,000. So part of it's going to be that.
Correct.
Part of it's going to be increase, just a normal increase. But is there anything else?
Normal
in that
increase,
that-
and again, with this, the shuffle in staffing, I think to come up with those projections in, early February, I think definitely they will get adjusted as we look at, was it a vacant, is it a filled, will it be filled by who and by how much? So,
So then I guess talk about that position. You would.
And just to run through some of the numbers first, we have 9 dispatchers currently, 2 records clerks. The counts for that salary line item.
Just circling back to where, picking up where Councilor Levine was, and this similar theme to my last questioning. Again, the disparity between what was budgeted for the current year and what we're projecting to actually spend, so we're about $100,000 short. So, but I also see that overtime is more than what was projected. So do we have one or more vacancies that had to
Several.
be filled in with overtime hours? Is that what accounted for that?
Yeah. Yes, actually, I think definitely we've been watching that particular overtime line throughout the fiscal year at finance. Not that it's a large budget line, but it's an overage that we're seeing, and it's definitely due to a number of vacancies. But at this point, everything is filled, so we'll see it kind of taper off, and that's actually again playing into that the projection again with vacancies. How long will they be vacant in February? Trying to project, when they'll fill in, when they won't, and now knowing that we're all full, your projection will be a more accurate number as you get closer to the end of the year. And yes, that is the reason for the overtime overage.
So when we have adjustments to make, will those adjustments be made before we pass the budget? And if not, the excess money that we're budgeting for here, where does that go?
The column that will adjust is the projection, and it doesn't affect the dollar. I think if you have a projection and everything's full, it's a wonderful tool, and you can see where you're going. When you have that, mobility at the time, I think our projection is not as helpful from a budget purpose, just because of the vacancies. So that number will change. It'll change and appear in the adopted budget as a corrected number, and it won't impact what the budgeted dollar amount is. So the budgeted amounts, these proposed, will be what we do here and change, and you'll know those before it goes.
Okay.
Did that make?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So I have a question for Ray, Mona, either one. So just piggybacking on this discussion, can you give us a breakdown of how many officers there are in the PD, how many vacancies are there currently, how many of them are in patrol, and what is the breakdown of what is budgeted for those vacancies right now as a backfill?
As a backup.
As a backfill, right?
Backfill.
That will be a backfill. That's not a new position, right?
We can get to those in each section. We're going. There are different.
Yeah, because I think it will basically give us the information which we are looking for, all these gaps between what Councilor Levine was saying and what Bill was saying. I think we just need a full picture, I guess, and that will address that. I think you should go through the whole PD list and account for the vacancies as well as whatever you're keeping as the budget items for backfilling those.
Yeah. Well, if I can, and again, I know projections make us uneasy because we're trying to put a piece to the final year end, and that's projection. What is proposed is a full salary for every position, whether there is a human in it or not. So, for example, with all of these dispatchers in that proposed budget, there are salaries. If it's a vacant, that would be at the first step. So there is a full-time salary for every position, filled or vacant, in the proposed. When you're seeing a projection, it is our estimate of saying, what are we going to not spend because they're not here? So I think we don't let vacancies deter your understanding of what is proposed for a full salary cost of a position.
To be very honest, I'm not still very clear listening to the answers you gave to Bill and Jeff as well. So I'm just being honest. That's why I'm asking for a little more clarity on that. I know you're going to work on this, but I think that will be helpful.
Sure.
Yeah.
Within this area of talking, is this the new position that's being proposed? The money coming out of that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Were you not
Is
there
there a
yet?
job description of this new position?
Yeah.
Well, it's not even an approved position yet, so I think there's some,
Well, how are we going to improve something if we don't know what it's about or what the position's for? I can't make a decision there.
Did you want
Is
to?
it needed?
I'm going to say, if you want to have the chief, he can tell you what his intent is, what his purpose is, what the
That'd help.
need is
Thank
for that, you know, and what the dollar amount is. Again, without funding, the position is not approved.
Well, you have it budgeted.
This is a proposed budget. We feel free to
Well, you have a
cut
figure in
everything.
here.
Correct. It is an
But
estimate.
is it because, you know, we won't be back for another year? So if we don't put the money in,
Right.
potentially, if this does go forward and it does get approved, we would have no funding.
Correct.
Is that why it's there?
Exactly,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I figure it has to be there, yeah. Chief,
evening.
could you just give us a review of what this position is?
Absolutely.
please?
So when this came in, we began developing the concept for this job. There was a draft job description provided to Dana, who has it in draft form. It's not completed yet until we know the position's been formalized and completed. But I can provide you as the concept and the background of the position. When we had our lieutenant, using names in these formats, but it's hard to put some context to it. But when Lieutenant Phelps left, he left a void for us in a real specialized area. In his past role as a lieutenant, as administrator, he had this flexibility to come and go, rely on his schedule for needs. He wasn't tied down to a specific task or a specific assignment. And he had this expertise in our radio communication system and our console and the townwide radio network. And what he provided was not just assistance to the police department. He was facilitating other departments with programming their radios, troubleshooting problems within the system itself, and being responsive to when problems happen on the spot. And that was something with the utility of his position. Being a lieutenant, being an administrator, he could make those moves, leave the office, respond from home 24 hours a day. And I can tell you I would get the phone calls because I was in my past role was the support service administrator, but he was specialized on the radio network and taking care of those resources. It was not unusual for Joe to coordinate with the fire department to program all their radios when they were new, update the programming for every vehicle we have, and coordinate that type of activity for townwide, not just for the police department and fire department, but any need the town had for radio or communications assistance. That was kind of what he did as we call it a part-time job, essentially. And so when he departed us, Joe didn't know when he was going to retire. The future of his employment with us was it changed every day. His mood changed with it. And we were fortunate that we had someone in-house who we could at least give some background to, and we kind of knew Joe's feet were kind of heading out the door. We had enough time to at least get one of our dispatchers kind of trained in some of these skill sets, really a real expert, not an expert, but someone who right now is keeping us afloat for everyday needs that occur, and in providing that resource for the fire department, being a resource for EMS if they need it, coordinating with the school facilities to make sure the radios are working, and coordinating and talking to our system. He's also I have some CAD records here of incidents and types of incidents he's handled recently. And we just pulled it out for you. But over the last few months, since January, we go back. I've asked to track these things to prove my hypothesis, if you will, right? And we have about 15 separate tasks in the last, since January, tuning up to about 30 to 40 hours of work, where Chris is leaving the desk. He's picking up his work, or there's an extra dispatcher if we're lucky, and he's doing the help and doing the assistance that Joe had been so great doing, like radio programming, addressing radio failures at the firehouses, going and troubleshooting before the vendor could even arrive to see if we could address it and fix it, and usually he's pretty successful. Software updates just for the radios that are pretty regular now with Motorola. You'll notice later on page 2 that the Motorola contractual price went up. Those are pieces that they're charging us to keep our things up to date on a regular basis, and there's a fee to that. And with Joe's absence and no one to do this kind of work that we have, my concept was this. We have a void. I'm not creating a job for Chris. I'm not creating a job for an individual. I'm looking for a body to not only support and fulfill the role that Joe once did for us, also be able to provide the town with the continued services and the responses from our department that they've been so used to. But if this position is not created, I'm going to tell you that I'm not going to be able to loan Chris out, even though he's good at it. on an immediate spot. It's going to be, hey, maybe we can get to you next week or next month. I can't expect a union member whose job is to sit at the desk and answer 911 calls to respond from home at 2 o'clock in the morning. I can't ask that of him. And so with this and the development of the job was kind of thinking bigger than that. And so we have a void that Joe left us that I need to fill, that the town needs, and whether it's and there's times there's a spike and there's times it's low, but there's steady work for this radio and communication system. But with that, and with the investment of a position like this, I'm able to provide a communication supervisor or coordinator, all right, to essentially oversee our entire operation. Give us a specialized supervisor who is a specialist in the area of communications, knows the policies, knows the procedures, knows all the systems, and actually give these dispatchers a superior person, a superior officer, a supervisor that talks the same language. Not just a lieutenant who's like, I don't know what you're doing, sounds good, let's do what you think. Looking for someone to kind of professionalize that division. It also gives me the opportunity to actually pursue ACE accreditation for the communication center. So actually we are an accredited police department. That report that was mentioned earlier is forthcoming. I'm still waiting for that from CLIA, so it's not official yet, but we did get some very good news on the exit interview, that nothing but positives to say. I was very pleased with the outcome of that meeting. I just don't have anything official to give you, but I certainly will be sharing that. But in addition to this, the concept is we've talked about at Public Safety many times about the hours of work that we have burdened our support service officer with. I've done a couple charts with that, how many hours of redactions he's doing on FOI, and the volume of tasks that I could fill 3 pages up of what this officer, our support service officer, is doing. So not only is this position creating a supervisor to supervise a unit, not only is a supervisor coming in to bring in an accreditation status that we will pursue to get us there, it also will be the town services and this radio communications expert that we do need, and to provide the level of services that we've been providing. But it's also going to allow me to shift some of the responsibilities from the support service officer, who's been burdened with the Freedom of Information request, doesn't get a lunch break, is running around the clock with his head cut off, and shift some of those responsibilities to our systems, internal systems, and FOI redactions to this position. So that's the concept. Be happy to come back with, I do have start off with a presentation on showing you where the job tasks move from one position to the other. But that's where we're at now. I mean, that's the concept. I'm telling you, this is not just filling a box and checking a box to ask you for $90,000+. I wouldn't do that. But there's a need on multiple levels, and if we can fill the void and the need for the town, but also succeed and accomplish some things internally for the department, to me, it's a win-win.
When you talk about filling a void for the town, are you saying that there may be support for other operations, like the fire department?
So we've been doing that, I should say Joe has been doing that all along. Joe has been, like I mentioned, his part-time job, he loved to tinker. And, he was kind of mentored by an officer back, about 2000s, and learned all these things kind of on his own. And through that mentoring, he really became a specialist. And we've been facilitating not only the system, right, taking care of the communication system, but also we're helping the fire department, helping EMS if they need that, programming radios. We, in fact, most recently, I'm just looking at the radio failure, another radio failure. I'm sorry. There's an entry here for an hour and a half of programming radios for 2 of our vehicles that were coming online. I know there's one in here regarding portable issue, and I know that he's done some radio upgrades. There we go. Radio upgrades for the fire dispatch channel, working with the vendor. So what I'm suggesting is that if we don't have someone or a specialist like this position, then we are not going to be able to address some of those matters for the fire department as promptly as we could. And either I have to pay overtime to do that, I have to pull Chris, who's the only one left in town that can do that, or whomever gets this position. But I can't use a line worker whose primary job is to sit and answer 911 calls and keep our officers informed and work the radio, and expect just to pluck them up and say, go take care of it, and leaving our center short. So, I can read off some of the pieces, but, another piece, and I know it's not necessarily the biggest thing for the council when we're talking about numbers, But, you know, Ray's vision for our, you know, when he talks to his leaders is about building your department, career advancement, morale boosts. How do we build your department and give people opportunities? Our dispatch center has worked with basically that's your career ladder is you're a dispatcher, which, trust me, I couldn't do it. I don't think half the people in the room could. It's a specialty. But once you reach that pinnacle, that's as high as you're going to go. And if we're looking to build our department and give these dispatchers an opportunity to advance, to promote, to grow, this position provides that for us too. You know, but the real, you know, the big points here is really the workload restructuring allows me to put new job responsibilities on this communications coordinator, freeing up my support service officer from doing certain redaction process, keeping up with the service and working with the other departments to make sure they have what they need, and also give me the opportunity to build and make our communication center better.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, you know, since we sort of have this baseline definition, do you anticipate that this is something that could be formalized to present to the council so that a decision is made in compliance with whatever, you know, budget line item we may approve, should there be an interest to approve it? Just wondering.
Exactly. Yes.
And I have to get up to close those shades because I'm getting such a migraine from looking at,
Yeah.
actually both of them. I'm so sorry. Thank you. I'm just seeing lines, you know, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll do that.
And I also, do we have information, and do similarly situated departments and towns in our area have similar type positions?
I can get that for you
That would be
in
helpful, too, I
specifics,
think.
but it's not uncommon. There are departments that have supervisors within the unit. Some of them utilize a senior dispatcher, maybe pay a stipend to do some of the administrative responsibilities. But that doesn't get me where I need to go with the specialty of the communications component to take care of our radio system and keep providing that support that everyone's become so used to.
Well, with that, is there a civilian town or a police department that has a civilian that does do that? Do you know of one off the top of your head?
Off the top, I mean, the communications component, I mean,
Not dispatching, the radio part of it.
Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, we are not like any other police department that I'm aware of. We've grown and we've had folks who have been invested in our services, and Joe's one of those guys. That's why he was so hard to lose. You know, he learned a system that wasn't his job to do, it was just something he was interested in. Drew O'Connor before that got into the areas where most people and most departments don't have specialists like we have or like we've had. I can't speak for you work previously, but if something breaks in our department, we have a guy dedicated to fixing those things and getting on them right away. And in most places, you're sending them out for repair. They're going to wait for weeks or months. And we pride ourselves on being able to keep our officers up and running as fast and quickly as possible, fixing computer problems. And you know, we're not quite the same in that regard. I always predicted that if Joe were to leave, we'd never be the same, like in a sense that we'd never have a specialist. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do here, is continue in that trend and where we've been so successful.
Question for Mona. Do we have a vendor that handles our radios on contract, or is that a qual basis?
We do, and I'm sure that, Brian, you may do it better justice than I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So on this page, actually under contractual services, or the radio line, excuse me, we contract with Motorola and with Norcom. We have a radio contract with Norcom to take care of a specific contract with Norcom to handle all of our components that are out of date and no longer covered by normal warranty. And then we have a contract with Motorola specifically, who handles the emergency call-ins and the major work and upgrades for the continued work on the system now.
So it's a contract, so it's not an hourly rate. So if you need somebody, they'll respond.
I'd have to look at the emergency night overtime rates, but essentially you're correct. There might be a call-in cost for overnights and emergencies and weekends, but in general, I haven't seen a bill from Norcom nor Motorola in some time.
So this can get taken care of without having an in-house person fairly quickly.
This position doesn't, I mean, having a service contract does not necessarily negate the need for what we have internally. Two good examples here is when we have sites go down, like the Company 2 on New Britain Avenue goes down and something breaks. one of the response that Chris made was up to that site to get there and analyze it, figure out what's going on, and actually fixing them before waiting 45 minutes, an hour for a vendor. So that might be a radio frequency that's not working. It might be a frequency for a fire department that has gone down. And that's the response that I'm talking about. I'm talking about fixing things on the move, on the fly, in real time. And if it can't be handled with us internally, yes, we lean on our vendor to come out on a response. They also come and do regular and routine maintenance and upgrades as well.
Right. Okay. How'd you come up with the salary, or what is the salary base you're thinking for this position?
So when I discussed this with Mona, she kind of looked at the salary lines in between the contractual salaries of a dispatcher and other members of our department, and found maybe I'll let you take that over from there, but basically found a number that fell in between elevated rate above a dispatcher, beneath an officer.
Yeah, and no higher than an officer, so we wanted to get something that was wedged in between, so.
What is
and
that proposed at?
So we have it at 95, and that is just, and that should be probably at that first step, so we're gonna start in between.
Oh, it'd be a step process you're thinking with this?
Anything in the bargaining unit will go to a step, yeah.
Okay. I don't know if, Chief, I'm just complexed with
Sure.
that it can get taken care of with the contracts that we have for service. I mean, it won't be immediate, but they will get taken care of a reasonable amount of time.
Something that wouldn't be taken care of, and we do regularly, is like the programming of our radios in our cars. Right now, I think the going rate for programming is $115 an hour to program radios and mobile radios in your cars, which is something that we're taking care of in-house through with Chris and his help, and Joe in the past. Something that we may not be able to continue to do on the basis that we do without having the body that I'm asking for.
What about Officer Lombardo? Does he do some of that too, programming?
No, I don't believe Mark does a lot of the radio programming. It's not something that can't be trained, don't get me wrong, but this is a position, Officer Lombardi's position is already 3 pages long on a job description, and I have to throw him out of his office just to go take a lunch break and a break, because he's working, 9.5 hours a day. And he probably didn't leave here today till 4:30 because working on projects. I take another support service officer if you give me that, but I'm not here for that. I'm here to kind of try to hybrid this together in the best interest of the department, best interest of the town, and best interest of the services we've been providing in the past.
I just thank you for your teamwork on accomplishing it as long as you have at this point. Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Should we ask to bring
All
it
that
up?
for a hypothetical position.
Well, Brian, Dana can work with Brian. Brian, you can work with Dana on the draft job description and tightening it up. We can bring it hopefully maybe Monday.
Try Monday's
Try
council,
Monday.
we can adjust the agenda if you want.
I'm prepared for that. I probably, not a problem.
Okay.
Good.
Okay, Ray, where are we?
I don't know.
Police support?
Yes.
Yes.
Don't let him go.
This is the investigations unit. I believe we have three detectives. Fairly straightforward goals, continuing participation in the Greater Hartford Auto Theft Task Force, and promoting proactive investigation strategies to address crime patterns and trends. You can see the number of criminal arrests, motor vehicle thefts. A lot of zeros on this page as far as zero increases. Support services consist of, the Narcotics Task Force, the investigative services, the TLO, TransUnion Investigative Services, which is for background checks and investigative research. Technical supplies, jumping down to technical supplies, we're looking at, for fingerprints, crime scene evidence, supplies, things of that nature.
So with respect to this proposed zero increase in full-time salaries, this sounds like another example where there's some money in contingency there, anticipating a new collective bargaining agreement.
Exactly.
So this zero increase, it's not real.
Correct. It has to get negotiated and it'll get funded when settled. Correct.
It'll come out of contingency.
Correct.
And where, the contingency that we've been talking about, that is, kind of this, this fund for the increases that are, end up materializing once we have a new collective bargaining agreement. So where in the overall budget is that? Is that just in general administration?
It has, it has its own page. It's actually going to be discussed on Tuesday.
Okay.
With it comes toward the back of the book with the employee benefits and contingency. And I think we had discussed at that last budget review that I will bring some detailed information without exposing which bargaining units we're talking about. In fact, I may do an email and let you know what the backup is to get to that number. So we've got retirements and unsettled contracts and snow and so forth.
Right.
So I'll send that out before Tuesday.
Okay, thank you.
Do you know, Ray, if the auto test task force, is that a full-time position or part-time?
I'm sorry, the what?
The auto theft task force, one of these detectives assigned to, is that full-time or part-time, do you know?
I think it's one of his duties.
One of the,
Yeah.
it's not the, Brian.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
not,
it's just one of the duties of.
Currently, the participation in the task force is part-time. Some of the activity funded through grant, other through overtime, through members of the DRR Detective Division.
Thanks.
yeah, don't go too far, Brian. You can sit down, but not too far away.
Let's get into steps.
They go to patrol.
Okay, uniform patrol. Of course, the goal always is to deter traffic through high visibility of patrols, proactive traffic enforcement. Goal number 2, to continue strong relationships with the community with a focus on programming and continuing events as they currently do and have done in the past, to maybe intensifying that a bit. Okay, I guess we can get into the numbers here as far as bodies, correct?
Oh, okay.
So we have 22 patrol officers, 3 SROs, 1 DEA, 2 admins, 7 sergeants, 1 lieutenant.
Very good.
Ray, how many patrol positions are vacant right now?
4?
Right.
2.
No. We're in the process, so I'm not sure how he's going to recognize that.
Currently, we have 5 positions that are unfilled. We have 1 officer currently at entry level in background, which would be going to the academy at the next date. And we have a prospective certified candidate also in background currently, which if they both come on, both consider come on board, will leave us with 4. Just let me check my notes. But
You mean, are these 5 officers?
so we are currently
Other.
5 officers. So we recently hired a certified officer from another police department, and we have one certified officer who's currently in background, and another entry-level officer in background. That would, if we bring all three on board, we will have four positions unfilled, provided we get those three I just mentioned on board, they pass their background checks, and we are continuing our hiring process now. We currently have 2 active lists for both certified and entry level. We have 22 active candidates on the entry level list, which Lieutenant Morgan's responsible for beginning those interviews within the very near future. And we're working on scheduling the certified officer who remains on that list to come in sometime next week for an interview as well.
I'm still confused. Is there 7 officers we're down totally without, right now, we're missing 7 or how many?
So we are 6 down. I'm getting myself confused.
No,
Sorry,
you're,
let me
you're
take a minute.
5 down
I
because
just
we
wrote-
brought 6 in.
Okay, we're missing 5, what you're thinking. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's 5. We have 1 currently in background.
I'm not worried about that.
Yeah,
I'm just
5.
worried how many holes we are for the shift.
For the moment, 5.
5, thank you.
5 today.
Okay, that's good, thanks.
Okay, I was confused too, because I thought you said if you filled those 3, then we would be down 4.
4, right. That's what I got, 7.
This is so
You
fluid,
did.
and I'm sorry if I'm confused. If
That's
you don't
fine.
mind, it's, I know it's in my head and it's hard. We have a certified officer who we're onboarding, he's hired. We have another certified officer in background. We have an entry level who's in background. And that's gonna, and then we have, with that being said, with those 3 coming on board, we have 4 positions that remain, which we're gonna continue to pursue to fill.
So that means we're down 7 right now.
Yeah.
7 minus 3 to get to 4.
No, because when they're actually hired, so when he's got them in the academy and training and so forth, they're actually like on the books, so.
Right.
Oh, but
Yeah.
they're not on patrol, but they're, yes.
Correct, that's a different response. Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah.
I understand, how about anybody else?
How long does it take to get them online?
So an entry-level position from job post through background check, through police academy, and then required field training takes us about 16 months, 14 to 16, depending on the candidate. If they come out, don't have any extensions. For entry, for certified, more likely less than 4 months between and be doing the announcement, the background check, and then bringing them on for orientation and an abbreviated field training.
We are quite down staff members. I'm just inquiring about that DE agent. How long has he been there, or do you know, in that assignment?
I believe he's assigned by Chief Custer about 7 to 7.5 years ago.
Okay. You know my background. Typically, that's a 2 to 3 year assignment. You gain knowledge, you come back, train your people and your local PD. Why is this continuing, especially when we're down so much in manpower for our town?
It's a fair question. I mean, being new to the job starting in July, obviously there's a lot of considerations for moves that we can make. That's not one we've looked at thus far. We have most recently filled a vacancy or a shortage we've had in patrol, backfilling that with some of our support staff that works internally. So we actually have members of those 5 support positions we have backfilling an open assignment right now for the foreseeable future. But as far as consideration of that type of reassignment, that's something, evaluating the success of the program, how long it's been, the type of revenue it generates, the crime and the arrests that are made. That's something we can look at in the future and talk about with the command staff, but it's not something I've frankly had the time to really consider. I think with the patrol division backfilling what we're doing now, we're back to 17 of a minimum of 18 numbers that we need, and have some strategies to try to get that 18th number kind of filled temporarily to kind of relieve some of that stress on the schedule.
Well, why is there such an overtime budget? You're spending so much in overtime.
Well, I mean, it's directly correlated to the vacancies. What happens with our schedule is when a vacancy occurs, you can't it's not necessarily easily just to rectify that vacancy because they have a contractual right to bid their schedules. So I can't just flop people around and move things as magically as I'd like to. And so we sometimes have to wait for that bid cycle to roll itself over. Like in this case, we had to wait a couple weeks before we could get those support staff in to start filling specific shifts. Our support staff work day shift. If I don't have overtime to fill on day shift, then they're working different shifts, and I have to respect their rights to their schedule as well, and not just bounce them around and float them to fill different shifts. It's just not It's out of respect both for what they do in their roles. Each of their 5, between the detectives, our administrative staff, Mark, you've mentioned earlier, and our accreditation officer have important roles in our department that need to continue in our 40-hour-a-week jobs.
No, I understand that, but my thing is, considering this person with the DA job or assignment, we are down so many people, that would be a nice bring home, fill, save some overtime for the town. I did get some information on him. He is a negative resource to us. He's costing us much more money than he's bringing in. So it's please consider that and report back to us at some point about that, if you could.
I'm just not, I'm not comfortable with that statement. I don't have, as the mayor, I don't have information. I don't know if other members of the council have this information. And if you do have a concern, I think that's something that should be brought up to the town manager as a personnel issue. We do not get involved in the oversight of those personnel issues, so I'm not sure what might be going on, but I'm not comfortable with that characterization, just for the record.
No problem.
Thank you.
I'm just trying to look at the budgetary items and where our resources are, and if we.
I
could
understand
save
that.
some
I
money.
understand, but getting into, I get it.
Okay.
Thank you.
So that was something I thought about. Also, along the similar lines about saving money is minimum patrolling. Do you guys assess minimum patrols for like the midnight shift, let's say? Do you need 4 officers out there? Do you look at the stats and determine if
Sure.
it could be realigned to a different shift, somebody?
I think I understand. So the minimum staffing numbers were adjusted by Chief Custer after the ARPA grant allowed 2 more officers to come on, actually increasing staffing. When that happened, we increased our minimum staffing from 3 officers and a supervisor across the board to 4 officers on days and 4 officers on evenings and a supervisor on both shifts. So where the calculation comes from, where they're assigned, really it's just call volume. It's very, I don't need to run a report to tell you we're busier on days and on evenings than we are on midnights. Ideally, I think we're reaching a point where increasing those levels will be an important goal of mine in the next 5 years. However, we have to have the proper staffing and discuss that in a lengthy budget hearing to talk about adding staff to do that and provide you the information to support that. But right now, I'm very comfortable with the way the minimum 4 on days and evenings and the minimum 3, these are patrol officers we were talking about, are running. Based on the current schedule and the number of bid numbers they have, the shifts are really, is a contractually, I'm looking for, the shift they have, the days off they have are a negotiated matter. So the job numbers are actually in the contract. So I can't just flip them around and change them either without going through a negotiation.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on police patrol?
Oh, I have more.
Yeah, actually,
Oh, go ahead, John.
If anybody else had anything.
John Emanuelis.
Yeah, actually, yeah, thank you. I just wanted to kind of leverage off, Fran, you had asked some of the questions I was going to ask. But just one thing, because I was looking at a budget from like 6 years ago, and the overtime was very similar, and I would imagine there were fewer patrolmen. So I really think, Brian, that there needs to be a focus on overtime, because the police department garnered probably, I think, 4 or 5 additional positions over the last 4 years. And you would suspect that with more personnel, overtime would decrease. Now, I understand what you're saying about the shifts and contractual obligations and everything, but with added staff, and I know there's some gaps, we really need to do something about this overtime, because it is a big slice of the pie that, with additional personnel, should be going down.
I could respond if you like. I didn't know if you had a question or just a statement. I can't see it.
Yeah, no, I just wanted, I just wanted to clarify that, because I think your answer to Fran was adequate. I'm just kind of thinking, because I was looking at a budget from 6 years ago. There are fewer patrolmen, and the budget and the overtime was lower.
Yeah,
So now you have more and the overtime is higher.
Yeah, something to remember is that increase in minimum staffing levels on days and evenings also creates an increased number of mandatory hours that we must fill. So although you see 2 bodies coming in or adding to the patrol staff, we've now increased the number of mandatory hours for 365 days across the board times 2. So it's almost, if we went back to 3-person staffing, you probably would see that correlation. But the fact that we tried to increase, Chief Custer decided to increase patrol staff to put more cars on the road, we now have more obligation to mandatory hours. If that answers your question. In addition to that, I just want you to keep in mind for this year, we've had an officer out on workers' comp since last April. They're leaving me vacant in a position that I cannot refill. And I also, you must recall, is that last budget season, there was an SRO added to the budget in the 9th inning, and that position came from patrol and was moved to fill the new created position in the school system. So really, I've been running short with 2 positions that one I can't fill because of the injury, a second has just been reassigned, and then playing catch up with the vacancies that have been created. So I understand the overtime component. If it's a conversation Ray and I can have, and if that's really a budgetary focus, primary focus, and a driver, then I will make the appropriate moves to make that the high priority. But you also can see from the last 6 years of budget, we've tended to kind of deal with the vacancies through the best we can with making some reassignments internally. But for the prior administration and today, if we're going to go to the point that that's the driver, that's the thing we need to cancel and focus on the most, we will, the only option we have at times is to disrupt other services and other positions within our department to do that, and sacrificing the jobs that we're trying to do, such as detecting, investigating crime, providing, trying to reach our CALEA status, and positions like Mark's, where those are the only places I can grab them from to provide the everyday response to problems and answers in programming and computers, et cetera.
So can I pose a question about the mandatory minimum staffing levels you alluded to, Chief? So I believe you said that this was an administrative decision by your predecessor as to how many, what would be the minimum number of patrol during the day and during the evening shifts, the shift from 3 to 4. Maybe, I don't know if I understood you correctly or not. The sense that I got from what I thought I heard you say is that once those were implemented internally as mandatory levels, now do they then tie to the collective bargaining agreement as far as a guarantee as to number of shifts that will be filled? Because I got the sense that once those were implemented internally, now your hands are tied as far as whether or not you can roll those.
Well, they're not contractually obligated. However, when it's not the answer that I, as chief, any chief wants to say is we have to reduce the staffing on our road. So to make that kind of judgment to reduce staffing to save a few dollars in overtime is not something I'd be very comfortable doing. So to reduce our minimum staffing levels simply to save some money on the overtime line, meaning less patrol officers, slower response time, and less officers doing routine patrol, I think there's a point where we have to understand that this, the police budget's going to always have overtime, and sometimes that expense means we're going to keep our officers out there doing their job.
No, I understand that. I just want to be clear that didn't somehow become tied into the collective bargaining agreements, that it becomes literally mandatory and out of our hands. It's more of it's management discretion decision on your end of it.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
I just have one quick question about the salaries. I don't know if this is for you, Chief, or for Mona, but does that number assume that you are fully staffed on July 1st?
The proposed, yes.
So what's the reality, the likelihood of that to be the case? Seeing as we're in May now, so.
Right, I mean,
2
to
months.
answer that, I mean, really, rather than answer kind of on the fly, I mean, I can get an analysis of what we have 22 active candidates in that entry level. We'd have to determine when and if we have academy seats available and time frame. I mean, the likelihood of all those positions being filled by July 1st is, I could attest to that, is unlikely. But I mean, that is our number one priority right now, is finding every measure. Had a meeting today about it, actually.
Oh, yeah, no, it's more like, it's just reality. It's like, it just takes time to do it. No, I'm not suggesting, no, I know it's a priority, but the reality is it takes time to do this stuff. So I'm just wondering, is that number too high? Because in reality, we're not going to be able, there's no way we'd be able to spend.
Yeah, and as a rule, we budget for the positions filled or not. I'd say if we wanted to start making a practice to build in, discounts for turnover, then that might be the place you would do it. So we said we've got
Yeah. I mean, not so much
35 positions. Should
turnover,
we
'cause-
really budget for 33 because we know we're going to have vacancy?
Yeah, I mean, not so much for turnover, because you can't, but if we know going in, we've got
Mm-hmm.
5 set, whatever the number you guys figure out, vacancies, and it's May 1st or May 2nd, and, likely we're not going to, there's going to be a period of time where they won't be all filled. Can we, that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about trying to figure out attrition, because that's a guessing
I
game.
know.
But we know there's a given right now that there's all
Yes.
these things that it's very unlikely they can all be
We
filled for
could
the
adjust.
entire year. So is there maybe some dollars to adjust there? Not to take away from any police, but the fact of the matter is, the likelihood they're not going to be there the whole year, so why?
I defer that response to Mona.
And we have had to do that in previous budgets when we knew we had a position and wasn't going to fill, so we would just budget a half year because we knew this wasn't coming until later.
Yeah, I
And
mean, maybe
think-
some of them are maybe budget 2 of them are 3/4 of a year, or one's out, whatever.
Yeah, it can be
based on
done.
history or whatever.
The one thing I would
We'll
just
work
add is in that conversation, to put me on a hard deadline for a 6-month position, and I have to wait 2 months to hire someone, and they go to another department rather than waiting for us to hire them, would be devastating.
No, I wouldn't suggest
No, we're
changing your
just
hiring
trying to-
practices for that. This
Yeah,
is
no, I
more-
understand. I mean, but if I'm given a hard cap on, hey, you have a 6-month position and you can't hire them before this date, that could be problematic for us with our efforts.
No, I mean,
We
you have to be
wouldn't do
concerned.
that.
Yeah,
I
no,
understand.
Yeah, but I also don't want to, look, it's a
Budget
tough
for
tax
what
year.
we're
We're
not.
trying to find everything we can, and if we could do that without really, we're not taking any resource away from you. You do what you got to do as soon as you got to do it.
Especially, I leave that Mona on the salary lines. That's all her show.
Yeah. So just to be clear, we're not
Yes,
taking
I
police. We're
know
not
exactly.
telling
Correct.
if you get them all hired day one, knock yourself out. But
I'd love to.
The reality is, if we're not, then there's some dollars there maybe we can utilize.
Well, I have a question about,
Okay.
that onboarding
John.
process and when the expense kicks in. So Chief, I believe you said that with when we successfully recruit a certified officer, it's about a 4-month process or so to get them trained and transitioned in. And then for the new officers going through the academy, I think you said 15 or 16 months?
On average.
Okay. So maybe this is a naive question. At what point do we start paying them? When someone's in the academy, okay, so we have a position we want to fill, we want to do with an entry-level officer, so they're going to go to the academy. If we know they're not going to be with us for 15 months, but they're in the academy, when do we actually start paying them?
Yeah, I was wondering that
Day
myself.
one,
You pay them on day one.
Employees.
While they're in the academy?
right?
Sir.
Okay, and same with the certified officers. Okay, so there's this lag then time where they're in the budget because we're paying them during this transition process. You still have the vacancy. I mean, maybe not on paper, but from a performance standpoint, but they are already an expense.
Correct.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
I have a quick question, and then I think you have a question, Counselor. So I think this should be a quick one. In terms of your strategy, hiring strategy, has anything changed from Chief Custer to you in terms of who you are targeting as hires in terms of early career versus, more certified late career police officers retired from other departments? Is there a shift there, or is it something which you're following from your predecessor?
So our hiring strategy really is obviously to find the best, most qualified candidate.
Of course.
We've added some steps into our process to try to vet our candidates a little bit better. But ultimately, your hiring process from application to getting in our door for oral board, generally about the same. But our strategy right now is we're focusing on kind of a hybrid blend of both entry-level and certified officers to try to fill the voids as quickly but as responsibly as possible. As the leader, as the chief of the department, and through Ray's direction, we have an obligation to think about the next 20 years of this department, the future leaders and the future development as well, what we're going to leave behind. And so to purely focus on just certified officers may range in age, and we may find ourselves a gap in time where we don't have that. And I don't want to focus on any sort of age requirement or youth here. It's not about that. But thinking on the long term, if we are hiring folks with 10, 15 years on from another agency who are aging out, decide to retire and not want to move up the ladder or just reach that point in their career where they're making their retirements, we don't have the folks coming up from the ground level working their way to the top and might have a void for leadership in the future. So the strategy is the blend between certified and entry level right now, and that's what we're focusing on.
Awesome.
In addition, we're going to try something crafty and creative, and we're going to try to reached out to the military base down in Niantic, and we're going to try to circumvent the MP program down there in a sense that we can actually bring in MPs as certified officers with just a little additional training, and we kind of get credit from the police academy to say they're not certified, but they're certified, and we can kind of speed up their onboarding. And we made a nice connection 2 weeks ago down there at Camp Net, and something we're going to be targeting pretty heavily here in the next couple of days.
Yeah, I think that makes complete sense. I was just wondering about is there any connection between like vacancies and like attrition rates and things like who you're seeing attriting versus like the strategy itself, right? Like, and is there obviously the leadership is a big component to it, right? Moving forward, like succession plans and like building a core in the police department. I totally agree with that. That's a great view to look at, have that kind of vision, right? But also, like from an attrition standpoint, I don't know where you're seeing that attrition from a vacancy standpoint. I don't know if it plays into that strategy.
Yeah, 2 of our vacancies recently were retirements, and 4 were from officers who left for other employment. So you can't always predict that. You can predict the retirement gentleman or woman who's been there for 25 years. You can kind of get prepared and get ahead of that. But the folks who leave midstream and pick up and look for other employment or other opportunities in business, we can't prepare for those. Those are kind of unforeseen.
Of course. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I actually have a question for Mona. Mona, regarding the fleet itself, is there a chance that you could develop with the fuel a list of the fuel used over the last 6 years with the cruisers?
I could do one.
Not prices, because
No.
that's volatile. I'm looking
Yeah.
for gallons.
No, I'd say in all honesty, I could probably get something for at least this year and the prior. We are making probably slower than I would like to say, progress in trying to get automated information from the fleet. So I'm looking, I would say if anything, it would be extremely manual, if non-existent, to be tracking something like that. But I do know we started looking last year with working with the town garage on keeping track of those things, as well as the current year. But so if that amount of information would be helpful.
Yeah, I'm just thinking
prior.
pre-COVID, post-COVID, the take-home and all that stuff. I would imagine 2019, 2020, it would have been much lower compared to now. So, I mean, whatever information you can garner,
Okay.
that would help. Thank you.
A quick question about, we develop a budget for these salaries. What happens when they're not used because we didn't fill these positions? Where does that budgeted money go?
To the fund balance.
Okay,
My
good.
favorite place, yes.
Good, okay.
Yes.
A question for the town manager. In the budget here, we have a lot of areas for vehicles. We have lubricants, tires, parts. There's no line item for purchasing vehicles. Did we purchase any vehicles in this budget year for the police department?
You know, we don't purchase vehicles through the budget. It's a special revenue fund. It's the asset allocation, special revenue fund. The vehicles are purchased out of the money
Why is that?
accumulated in that fund. So we don't have to spend town money through our budget to purchase vehicles.
Where does that money come from?
It comes from various, you can explain it better than me, but
You want me to?
crime, property.
I hope we are not generating it from crime.
Unfortunately, you are. I wouldn't laugh about
Mona and I
that.
can kind of share a response
Go
with
ahead.
you. I'll let you explain
I will.
your account and my account.
Yeah.
Since previous administrations going back to 2016, I believe it was, that was the last time vehicles appeared in the town budget. That was a decision made by a prior town manager to remove them altogether. And since that time, we've been following that process where we provide our needs to the town. If the resources are available through the accounts she can tell you about, we work together. We also have an asset forfeiture account that is developed through the money seized through the officer and the DEA. And so over the course of time, when the town doesn't have it and we have a need, I allocate, I've only approved 2, but in the past, Chief Custer will approve the purchase of a vehicle if necessary through those funds there. And then the other piece I'll let Mona fill you in about.
Yeah, and the other, they're both special revenue funds, with the other being the private duty fund. As we know, they're doing the highway jobs. I'd say probably a number of years back, that was the one of the chosen sources of making vehicle purchases since the defined benefit plan happened. We made an agreement that that particular fund would be used to offset the cost of that defined benefit plan. If you recall, that was several $100,000 more than we were prepared to expend. So that particular source of revenue was no longer a viable source to do the vehicles. And as Chief Klutz says, the asset forfeiture fund, and I hate to say that, is it from crime? Yes, it is. I mean, this is the money that we're getting from asset forfeiture. So, and the revenue on that in the past couple of years, I think because of that work and aggressive, research and working with the federal government, we've been able to receive about $200,000 in 2 years in a row. Prior year, without a lot of aggressive work on that, I imagine it was not the aggressive work versus not enough crime, but we did have a smaller level. I'm going to try to bring some information like that to share so you can see the peaks and valleys of how that happened.
So I got a question. The DEA has come up a couple of times in conversation. Once was reference to one of our officers. And I take it that's a Rock Hill police officer who's embedded with the DEA or on loan or sort of part of a task force, that sort of thing?
Correct.
Okay. And now the DEA just got mentioned as a source of funds for the for asset forfeiture revenue. Is there some connection there between those two things? Do we have to lend an officer to the DEA as a condition of sharing in those funds, or are those just two unrelated
Correct.
things?
Officers assigned to FBI task force or like the DA become TFOs, or essentially become deputized officers, an agent working for the federal government on our salary, and they do cases in the Hartford area. It's based out of Hartford, making arrests, deterring fentanyl and other crime and other drug activity that it affects our community. And obviously that's the priority. A nice side effect is a source of revenue when seizures are made. That officer is credited with the amount of hours that they work and dedicate to a specific case, and he gets a percentage of the money or assets seized.
Say he gets it, you mean
Well,
the department gets it?
Excuse me, yeah, I shouldn't say that.
Okay.
Brian, if
So,
I could.
so that expense of paying for a Rock Hill officer who's embedded with the DEA, that is offset somewhat by revenue that the officer helps to generate from the forfeitures?
Just
Can
on
I do that one? Because that's when people say finances and in bed with them, it just terrifies me. What we get is two sources of revenue. We get for any of the overtime that he puts into that particular service gets refunded to the town. I'll say their turnaround time is a bit on the slower side because it's federal money, but it goes right into your general fund as a source of revenue. So that overtime is there. And then the special revenue, I think when I was making reference to the aggressive efforts on that. We get to share the same database, so I see all the financial side of it, and I can see that, in 2019, there's $1 million there, and I know that on the other side is going to be that particular person that's on our side that's going to be doing the paperwork and the research, and, I think if we were not being, and I'll call it aggressive, looking at that list and seeing what to do with it, then we could forfeit, basically, that asset forfeiture fund. So I think it's the focus and the dedication and maintaining that claim list and looking at, here's something, is there a piece of it for the town of Rocky Hill? If the person drove through, and I may not do it justice, but, the entire New England states, everyone gets a portion of it. If we're not maintaining that system and looking at the outstanding claims and trying to go in and say, this is my piece, and these are the hours I worked on, then that's how we're getting that $200,000. I would imagine there would be other towns that don't put that energy into it and are not getting that kind of revenue. As I said, I've seen prior years that there will be virtually nothing, and I'll try to graph that out, that the amount coming in is just not great, and I don't sense that it was necessarily because we were such a crimeless world only a few years back. So that's right. So you do see the peaks and valleys, and I think it's a definite indication of the effort working on that reporting side.
Yeah, let's not forget, that role works closely with our task force members, is providing proactive investigative services, making arrests for some major criminals. These are not small street-level users. These are criminals, gang members, who are trafficking high-level drugs within our community. And that is a proactive step we are committed to try to keep that out of our town. And when we need that resource for a case in town, we can tap into that officer to provide other resources for us as well.
Quick question, how many cars did we purchase for the police department 2024? Or the budget that we're in currently?
This current one, you're expecting me to, I think we have 3 from asset forfeiture.
Not, how many did the town purchase altogether, not just from asset forfeiture?
The town did not purchase any, so asset forfeiture purchased the 3 police vehicles.
Okay, that's what we got.
Yeah.
How
We did,
many
you're talking police only. We did do a
Yeah.
lease through finance for 2 trucks, which came
Well,
in as well.
For the police?
No, I was saying, are you talking vehicles
No,
in
no,
total or
just for the
police only?
Yeah,
Okay.
police only.
3 police.
How many are projected in the budget for this upcoming budget?
Because it is special revenue, there is nothing budgeted in this general budget, which we haven't done for years. And when you're doing special revenue, you do not budget. What you do is you watch for the funds to come forward. And again, I think if I can show you that chart and see that if the funds are in, you can make a purchase. If there's no funds in, there will be no purchase. So it is not a budgeted
It's just
scenario.
it's a big concern to me because it's taxpayers' money and the council isn't even aware, the full council, where that money's going for vehicles.
Yeah.
That's a substantial amount of money.
If I may,
No.
yeah, if I may. Again, the taxpayers' money, we're talking about the general fund budget. The asset forfeiture, as we're trying to describe, is funds that will be used for the town of Rocky Hill for the designated purposes according to the federal government, which says you can use it for such things as vehicles, body cams, there's a medley of lists.
Specific to law enforcement.
Correct. It has to be law enforcement. There's quite a library. In fact, a certain dollar amount, then you have to ask them in advance what you would like to spend. And as far as not being aware, I will say that since I've been finance director, we started doing a special revenue report. That's where these special revenues are. Believe it or not, for the past, I don't know, it's probably 100 years, but I can vouch for 24, those special revenues show in the audit. That's what we do. Special revenues get a special attention because they have a special purpose. The revenue comes in for a purpose, it's sampled, it's reported accordingly. I couldn't go out and buy a bicycle out of the asset forfeiture, for example. But I am proud to say that we do try to be transparent. I am beyond transparent, if we haven't seen yet, that we do that special revenue report every month to the Finance Committee. Each individual item had never been done on that level before. It's reported monthly, and so we do know where those dollars are. We know when they come in. We know when they go out.
Oh, no, I understand that.
So, no, I just want to make sure that we don't say that there's money to the town and nobody knows. It's beyond transparent. In fact, more transparent than it's ever been.
Maybe transparent, but we're the town council, and I'm unaware of any vehicles bought for the police department. And I don't know if anybody else can, but.
I would say perhaps the
but the
Finance Committee
people,
knows.
Obviously, they know.
Mm-hmm.
But that's
what
not
we do.
something that, I think it's something that the town council should be more involved with and oversaw, or at least informed where it's going, full town council.
Well, I can say, Fran, from past experience, when we were deciding on the cruisers, it was relatively painful, a discussion, because we want to make sure they have adequate equipment, and it's painful if they ask for 3 and we can only fund 1 or whatever, and it just becomes a very lengthy process. To Mona's point, that it was transferred over to that special way of financing the cars and off the council's plate, I think has become a little more efficient. But I can say it was very painful when we were talking about it.
Yeah, but I don't think we are talking about so much about efficiency and what should be the right process for buying the vehicles. The point being just information for the council. I think that's where the focus is, at least that's where I'm focusing. I think that's, and I know you reported to the finance committee, I totally get that. but I think just general information will be helpful. That's where I will go. I'm not suggesting that you change the process right now and then go to another process, because I don't know the ins and outs of the previous process, right? So I'm totally fine with that, but just like to underscore you can't go wrong with more information. That's all.
But wouldn't this really be the finance committee's thing? I mean, like,
That's my
if
understanding,
you're
but
reporting it
it's
to
not my area.
finance,
Part of the
then
report.
finance could just bring it up to, yeah,
Make
so,
a standard part of the finance committee report.
Yeah.
That's problem
Yeah.
solved.
Yeah.
okay.
In fact, I think.
Well, that's what you're
It's in the
doing.
minutes as well when we
Yeah.
have discussions. In
So
fact,
let's just bring that up when you're reporting whoever's on finance, and we'll bring it up. And Counselor Greenspan's not here. Trevor Greenspan.
Yeah. One last thing on
but-
this. On this.
But Bill, are you on finance? And are you comfortable, I mean, do you feel, are you comfortable with that process, I guess?
What, you mean the reporting process?
Yeah.
I think it is extremely transparent and informative. We go over it. Jeff can vouch for this as well. We go through it every month. And that's the sort of thing, if we see a decline in the balance for police for, the asset forfeiture, it'll come up. Oh, it went down X number of dollars because we bought a cruiser. And that's something that the chair of finance can include as part of the reports to the full council.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I add? Can I add one thing? Maybe we could use some of that asset forfeiture money for some of the equipment. If it has to be dedicated to the police department, maybe some dollars can be taken off the equipment side of the main budget, where the asset forfeiture doesn't go always to a car or whatever. Especially if we have a reasonable expectation on a yearly basis.
I have to say, because these are federal dollars, there is a very strict guideline that they refer to as supplement and not supplanting. And basically what that is going to tell you is that something that you would ordinarily put in your general fund budget and shifting it off to a federal source would be an unallowed use. So, for example, these, like a one-time purchase such as the vehicles, or we did was it WatchGuard? We did body cams, which was a larger purchase. Which was not something that's budgeted. We do a regular monthly lease for an undercover vehicle to be used. So it's those type of things that you would not ordinarily budget. So I think there may be some equipment that could fit into it, but we have to be very cautious that we don't get into that habit of shifting funds from general fund into a federal, because that unfortunately then becomes rejected during the audit and rejected from the federal government, who I have to report to every year in detail with invoices. And what we don't want to do is spend it from a source and have it rejected and then try to come back and find it the following year with a violation. So, but there are a few items,
I
yes.
would agree. Yeah, I would agree with that, except that it seems though back in 2016 or wherever Council Manuel said we used to have cars, now we don't. I don't know if that's shifting, what a normal purchase would be on an annual basis to that fund too. And a body cam to me seems like it's a piece of equipment as well. So I'm just, if there's an opportunity, prior research, that we can quote unquote shift, but it's not a shift, that would be helpful, I think. And that might be more like a couple year process to figure it out.
Right. That's good. We could. Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you.
Move to adjourn?
Yeah. I'm telling my kids to put the dinner away, so it doesn't.
I'll second.
I'm so sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.